Welcome to Left Coast Live. It is Tuesday, November 26th. I am your host, Dieter McBusiness, joined as always by the one and only StatPat Stateless Patriot. Happy Thanksgiving to you. This will be our one and only live stream of the week. And I hope you have fabulous plans for Thanksgiving, StatPat. I can't wait to get in the car tomorrow and drive 3 hours.
Oh boy. Yeah, I wish that was the case for me. My second job didn't end up giving me this weekend off like I requested, but I ended up doing it a bit too late. So, I guess I can't really complain. But I'll just be basically working every day this week, regardless, except Thanksgiving itself, which I guess we're just gonna do food here and whatnot. But
Good.
that's life,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, there'll be a good amount of football on, although the football Thanksgiving Day
Yeah.
games aren't that good.
I
They're all
forgot
pretty.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least I got that to look forward to.
Um. So what's on your mind these days, man? Trump's talking about tariffs. We've moved on from mass deportations, so it's all just a matter of anticipating what's going to happen next. Um, and we also need to talk about the death of baby boomer bipartisanship, the meaning of Kamala's loss to Trump, and I wanted to talk about our revolution of righteous rage that the progressive
Yeah.
left is going to need to go on here. Because have you joined Blue Sky? Yeah, you have. I've seen you on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And have you noticed how few people are talking about the problems in the DNC?
Uh, I the
Because I've
most the,
searched DNC, I've searched like changing DNC or whatever, and very few people are talking about getting rid of the Clinton, Obama, Biden people. It's really frustrating.
yeah, no, of course they're the kings. They're the kings and queens of the
The
fucking party.
nobility, yeah, the nobility of the DNC, yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I don't think I haven't seen a single thing. Honestly, it's disheartening. You know, the
I
only
said one thing on Blue Sky, and then this woman chimed in. She said, "Don't attack allies," and I said, "Well, we got to learn from our mistakes here. Like we just lost. A good competitor learns from their mistakes. Shouldn't we learn from ours here and figure out what went wrong in some kind
exactly.
of specific way?"
Yeah, yeah. The inability to look inward and actually properly assess mistakes and who is good and not good for the party.
Right.
It, it's so frustrating. Like I don't feel like these people are going to learn at all, and I'm not seeing any like actual meaningful engagement or budging when it comes to the issue of cleaning out this party.
Well, what I can, I'm struggling to understand. Sorry.
Hmm.
What I'm struggling to understand with the DNC is it seems that they do not realize the paradigm shift that we are in the middle of right now. The incumbency is no longer an advantage, it's a disadvantage because people expect a lot these days. And when they don't get what they want, if they have an ability to complain, they will complain. And that means voting out the party in power.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
The,
mean
go ahead.
uh, there should be more complainers. There should be like the mainstream media should be having on whoever they have on, honestly, who's a Democratic politician or whatever, or strategist, analyst, whatever, should be pulling their hair out in frustration over the failure of the Democrats this last election cycle. It, like, and now Bernie Sanders is signaling like he's pretty much done with the Democrats. It's like what
Yeah,
exactly is in store? Like a third party like that has a lot of they're too. I'm not too sure that it's going to be successful, but like just something to shake them awake. Anything,
right.
honestly, like show them where they went wrong.
Well, so did you listen to the Pod Save America interview with the Harris people?
No.
Yeah, we maybe we'll have a look at that. But long story short, is they're in denial about whether they lost. They think they made up ground. They think the 107 days was a big restriction, and I've never really felt like the 107 days wasn't enough time, particularly when you had that surge of interest. Remember, she broke a bunch of
Right.
fundraising records when she first took over for Biden.
Well,
So,
well, it's like, okay, so if the problem was she just didn't have enough time, surely they were blaming Biden and dragging him through the mud,
no, of
right?
course not.
Oh
No, of
yeah,
course not. And that
exactly.
was only one of the excuses that they gave was that she didn't have enough time, although they talked about it quite a bit. And the other thing was that they just felt like they were constantly reacting to Trump. They weren't putting anything out there. They were asked about Liz Cheney, and they felt like that would motivate the voters to give her credibility on
No,
bipartisanship.
no.
And it's just like you alienated all of the progressive Democrats. I was writing my episode today that I'm going to record on the green screen, and it's, yeah, I don't have any compunction about claiming that progressive Democrats are the most politically savvy voting bloc in American politics. We know about the history of policy since 1980. We know it really well, and we know that a lot of it is Democratic Party capitulation to conservatism.
Yeah, it's been that way since the Clintons. Yeah, like Reagan absolutely screwed up the federal budget, and then Clinton came in there and fixed, just cleaned up his mess, and like the Democratic establishment have just been just kissing the ass of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton for decades now. And it's just like we can't move on. Like, for crying
Yeah,
out loud, everybody in Washington are friggin' old.
I
Like
know.
the average age of like, I think the Senate is like what, like upper 60s or something like that,
Something
70s
like
even.
that. Yeah, they're
It,
super
it,
old.
it's crazy. People have been around for decades. Is of course they're unwilling to change. In their mind, it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's very fucking broke.
Yeah, it's very broken. Now, I was talking to my dad today, and even he was a successful businessman and whatnot, benefited from the system. I said, this doesn't work. This
No.
version of capitalism is not working. It's
Right.
producing incredible inequality. The seeds of revolution are here. I don't know how it manifests, but all the ingredients for an economic implosion are amongst us. But yeah, it was really frustrating to hear the Harris people give all these. I mean, it was really the Biden people that ran Harris's campaign. And
Yeah.
I think that was a huge problem. That was probably the biggest problem from just a infrastructure perspective, was that she never really
I
had the opportunity to bring in her own people in her
Yeah.
own inner circle. But even then, she probably still would have done the same strategy.
Yeah. I feel like she was indebted to them in a way, because she did end up like taking all the fundraising money that they made and used it for her own campaign goods. Megan in chat says she broke the fundraising records because they transferred funds from the Biden campaign. That was like that's something that a lot of people like seem to forget, is like she basically took everything
Right.
that they
Yeah, but she
fundraised and
also
used for.
saw a record number of contributions right after
I
she
was gonna
took
say
over.
that. I was gonna say
There
that
was a
too.
lot of
That
small dollar
Yeah.
donations that came in after she
Yeah,
took over for
even after
Biden.
everything was all said and done, yeah. After the actual like transfer and like her being the head of the ticket was finalized and all that. So, yeah, yeah, no. It just didn't matter in the end. It's like you could fundraise all this money, but you're just not utilizing it the way it should be utilized. Honestly,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Democratic Party going forward, because we are going to be in survival mode for these next 2 years.
yeah, and there's no hope of Citizens United getting overturned because of the Supreme Court makeup
Yep.
the way it is right now.
And he's going to
And
get another two judges, too.
oh
He's going to,
my
Clarence
God.
Thomas is going to retire, Alito's going to
Mhm.
retire, and just get out of the way and let Trump pick them.
Yep.
And then we're going to then a big campaign point will be packing the court. People are going to be demanding to pack the court. Enough is enough. Like, this is ridiculous. The
Yeah.
Supreme Court should not
Yeah.
look like this. And shame on Jimmy Dore when Sam Cedar tried to warn him about Trump potentially winning in 2016, he highlighted the Supreme Court, and sure enough, Cedar was right because Cedar's 10 times smarter
I'll
than Jimmy Dore.
I'll never forget that. Like any day now, I'm sure the moon is going to fall into Lake Michigan.
Right.
I'm sure of it.
Yeah, he's such a douchebag.
Yeah.
He's such a douchebag. But
Yeah, Meg is asking, did she break Bernie's record? Actually, I think she's referring to
overall, I
small
don't know.
small dollar
Yeah, yeah,
donations.
yeah. I
I
I
don't
don't know about
I
that's a
don't
lot of
I don't think
that's
so.
granular. That's pretty
Yeah,
granular, but probably not. No way. With that amount of
I
time.
don't think
Yeah.
so. Not to
Yeah.
mention, I mean, Bernie didn't even like make it out of the primaries. Like this is like Biden ended up getting the nomination. Like there really was no actual like primary that the Democrats had. Like nobody cared about Dean Phillips. People certainly didn't give Marianne Williamson any fucking respect at
No.
all, unfortunately. But yeah, she says, "Oh yeah, fact checking for all, she did not." So yeah, only record she broke was money for a quarter, which was due to Biden funds. Okay, I
All
mean,
right.
yeah, I mean, it still didn't really amount to anything. It's so ridiculous. It's like, and where's all that money go now? Like, was it even all like expended? Like, what was it even
No, they're
all
not in debt.
used?
That's what they said. That they're
No,
not
of
in
course,
debt. But
of
it'll
course.
go into the Democratic Party war
I
chest.
no, of course, I wouldn't expect them to be in debt after this. I mean, with how much money was raised. But yeah,
So, um, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. What was I thinking about? Fuck. Do you have anything? I just got totally
Oh,
my brain broke.
well, my header for today is the ICC issuing arrest warrants
Yeah,
for
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu and one of his
Right.
other heads of state, and also I guess three members of Hamas, I believe, but two of them are confirmed dead. The third one is suspected to be dead. So uh, this is a really really big deal. Like the ICJ is one thing, but the ICC, people are going to take this seriously. Like if Netanyahu steps into basically any country except for like a small handful,
Mm-hmm.
he should expect to be arrested on the spot, like the moment he lands.
Where?
So, oh well, I mean, there are multiple countries that have already come out and said like, yeah,
If he
if he
ever
lands
comes
here,
here,
we
right?
would. I think Ireland, Canada, um, South Korea, I believe. There are a few that have signaled. Oh yeah, France is another one of them. We will comply with the ICC and blah 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 blah. So
Yeah, he's
that is
not going
very
anywhere.
very promising. Yeah,
It's good. Yeah, only in America we're in denial here. One of like what 10 countries that are still in denial about it being a genocide. To
yeah.
test him, the Zionism in our media environment is palpable,
No, of course.
and
Yeah,
it's not Judaism; it's Zionism. Like generational change says, Zionism is not Judaism. Although it depends on the
yeah,
Jew that you ask whether or not that's true.
yeah. It's disgusting. Like this trope that criticizing the Israeli government is anti-Semitic, or criticizing anybody who just unconditionally supports Israel, like no matter what. Like anybody who does that is anti-Semitic. It's just like there are a lot of Jews that don't support what Israel is doing. There's a lot of Jews that don't
Right.
support giving them arms and
I know a lot
whatnot,
of them. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and claiming that they're anti-Semitic themselves because they're not going along with Zionism, which is not Judaism, is in it of itself anti-Semitic.
Right.
Like period. Because we don't go along with your genocidal, settler colonial ideology, like that. It's anti-Zionism. So trying to claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic is just dead wrong. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because he thinks he's got carte blanche now that Trump's going to be president. I mean,
Yeah.
Netanyahu just is a complete sociopath. He just does not care. He
No,
has
of
to stay in
course.
power, otherwise he's going to get brought up on charges. But I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
like
still
a
another.
real president says, "Hey Netanyahu, you're going to surrender to authorities, or I'm taking away weapons for 100 years. You put a big number on that, and you have 1 week to
Yeah.
comply or something like that.
No, of course. I mean, at the very fucking least, like someone else should be in charge. I mean, of course, Israel as a project is it's not worth defending. Honestly, like we invest way too much money. Like they give their people free healthcare.
What a
Like
stupid
that's
idea Israel was. I mean, to
yeah,
put a
of
Jewish
course.
state on Arab land was just dumb.
Yeah,
Like, it was just a stupid idea. And I'm not reluctant to say that at all. I'll say that to anybody's face.
no, of course. Like it's just who cares about who has what claim to what land over there?
Goes back hundreds of years, man. Goes back 50,
exactly.
goes back 1400 years.
No, exactly, and it's like that's not a smart move at all because it's like y- they're a puppet state that receives our
Yeah,
unconditional funding
financing.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're constantly agitating their neighbors. Y- it, the
Although
fact
they
that
do a lot
people
of business with Jordan, they do a lot of business with their neighbors too. They have peaceful relations relatively with most of their neighbors, other than like Syria and obviously Palestine. I don't know if you call
yeah.
Palestine a neighbor, but it's like an internal part of the
Yeah,
state.
it's an open air prison. Honestly, they occupy it.
So how long
it's
do you think this ceasefire that Biden's calling for lasts? A week? 10 days?
who knows. Honestly, Israel
Christmas?
says if Hezbollah breaks the ceasefire agreement, then that'll give them the green light to
Light them up?
continue
Yeah.
erasing lives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really depends because Israel, time and time again, whenever there has been a ceasefire, has not complied with international law whatsoever. They violate the terms of
No.
the ceasefire and everything. And they're constantly the aggressors in any given situation. And this is with Hezbollah. Next is Hamas. Who knows if anything's going to come of it? But either way, getting new leadership in Israel is just step one,
Hmm.
and there's no telling if like the next person who takes Netanyahu's place will be
Just as
just
bad?
just as bad.
Yeah.
Honestly, like
No, I think we
it's
got to
it's
halt
inherent.
weapon sales for at least a decade, and
No, of course. I mean, there's
let's see
two more
let's
months
see
until
how you
Trump.
guys do on your own.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. It's 2 more months until Trump takes office. So I mean, I'm not holding my breath because Biden has shown time and time again that like no matter what vague red lines he draws, that the Biden administration draws, Israel
They
can
don't care.
basically do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah,
Honestly,
they
especially
don't
like
care.
with the people that Biden has as an administration, just completely feckless, just completely sold out to Israel, and Trump's just going to be worse because he has multiple cabinet picks that are explicitly is
Pro-Israel, yeah.
Israel
Basically,
first.
Zionist, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Mike
without a
Huckabee.
doubt. Yeah,
Yeah, the evangelical Christians like are jealous of the religious credibility that Jews have because their religion is older than Christianity, and the whole Old Testament
yeah,
is a Jewish text. So it's
yeah,
kind of like Christianity is built on the backs of 5,000 years worth of Jewish history.
yep.
So that's quite a relationship.
Yeah, it's
And
almost like
the
if it,
evangelicals want it a lot more than the Israelis, but now the Israelis see it as a political alliance.
no, yeah, exactly, without a doubt. And it's like, what makes Christianity more of an authority of how to live your life and what teachings to follow if Judaism is a much older religion? It's hilarious to think about because it's like you're purposefully and consciously choosing to follow this particular sect of beliefs despite it being a younger sect of beliefs.
Hmm.
It's, it's insane. It's all insane. Like I'm an atheist for a reason. I really hope that atheism makes a big comeback. Honestly, like it all just took a nosedive after the skeptic community started schisming and going towards more anti-SJW content in the mid 2010s, and after Christopher Hitchens died, it's and Richard Dawkins is basically a cultural Christian now. It's ridiculous, honestly. It really does need to make a big comeback because religion is just such a huge source for
Needless conflict.
needless conflict.
It's
Yeah,
churn. They
it's
call it in the business. They call it in the business world churn, which is just like a negative consequence or a negative externality, which is just a negative consequence of positive change. So,
yeah,
yeah, don't get me started on religion, man. I will have a fucking field day. I mean, more people have been killed in the name of God than anyone else. Like, give me a fucking break.
exactly.
Okay, give me a fucking break. Like,
Yeah,
so much needless conflict. Our nation was founded as a result, in large part, the way it was, uh, as separate from the church, because
yes,
we've talked about it before. All the founding fathers knew that religious wars had dominated the European continent, their ancestral continent, for over
yeah,
300 years. That was 300 years before the founding of the country,
yes,
that there was
yes,
religious wars that defined European culture.
yeah,
And that's generations. That's like 10 generations.
yeah, yeah. No,
That
exactly. That's why the founders in the First Amendment they specifically said explicitly,
freedom of religion.
yeah, you're free to practice any religion you want. Like they knew like the importance of not having a state sanctioned religion, a national religion of sorts, because they saw what it led to. It like all throughout Europe and whatnot, just like needless conflict, like you said before.
When you
It,
actually study religious history and you see the things that have been done in the name of God, you just realize that organized religion, not spirituality. Spirituality's great, but organized religion, I don't see much good about it.
no,
I don't see much good about it. Maybe encouraging community, maybe
yeah,
philanthropic endeavors, but even then it's kind of bribery, right? Like, hey, I'll give you this loaf of bread, but I'm going to give you a Bible too, and you have to accept one. If you want one, you got to have the other.
yeah.
You
And now
know,
there's a thing in like Oklahoma where they're basically like forcing public students to do school prayer, and like they're like I think they're actually handing out
yeah,
Trump Bibles
Trump
like that.
Bibles,
That
yeah,
is like the state sanctioned uh, book for public schools. I think they're in like every class. It's I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I'm not too far off. It's disgusting, and once it eventually does go up to the Supreme Court, because this is definitely a constitutional violation. Who the fuck knows what the Supreme Court's going to say?
yeah. I mean, I just don't have any confidence in it anymore.
No,
I don't have any
no.
confidence in the institution of the Supreme Court. Growing up, I had so much reverence for judges, and now I've realized that not only are they people just like you and me, but they are egomaniacs.
Yeah,
The ones that want to be on the Supreme Court are, by and large, egomaniacs. They want that power. They want to be in the history books, and they care more about that than they
yeah,
do actually writing or interpreting the law, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah. And you know, history is not going to have very kind things to say about them, especially
No.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg
Yeah, she
in
fucked up.
particular. Hmm.
She really fucked up. Well, in terms of your atheism, just so you know, you should check out, just have a fun rabbit hole at some point, people who have survived near-death experiences, because it really, my parents are in a tough spot, and they're kind of coming in on the last mile,
Oh
and
yeah,
so to me, it makes you think about your own mortality, and so I
of
went down a
course.
rabbit hole and watched a bunch of videos of people that had near-death experiences, and it doesn't sound so bad. Sounds kind of nice.
Yeah, no,
These all seem like good people though, so I bet they went to the good place.
right. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you have a near-death experience, you basically get a surge of biochemicals in your brain, particularly DMT, which is naturally produced in the brain, and that basically like it basically jolts you into a different state of consciousness in a way, I guess you could say.
You're high.
And
You
yeah,
get naturally high.
you do, and like people have reported on seeing basically like seeing God or like seeing like spiritual beings or whatnot when they're in this state of consciousness, when they're in this state of mind, and a lot of them ended up like reporting on seeing the same things because I mean,
Right.
we all like the same biochemical makeup in their brains for to an extent, So it's like it makes sense that like those near death experiences are shared amongst other people.
Hmm. Well, thank you for ruining that.
You're welcome. Yeah, no,
So it's just
it's
another chemical reaction, huh? That's what you're
oh,
telling me. Even when the heart stops, you're saying the brain is still alive, and there's a
for
chemical reaction going on inside the brain that feels a lot like being high. And but
yeah,
people account like going back through their lives. People talk about
life
uh,
flashing before your eyes. Yeah,
yeah, but that only happens like 1/3 of the time or something. And people that have been surveyed who have had near-death experiences, it's not every time. But
right.
anyway,
Well, from what I understand, like when your heart stops, your brain is still
still going.
active for like maybe 11, 12 minutes after like like your heart is just gone and you're dead.
But
And
there's still electrons firing in your brain.
yeah, it's like you're basically dreaming, but like for what seems like eternity because you're dead. Like
Right.
that's pretty much it. As I mean, of course, I've never I can't speak from experience, obviously, but um, from the accounts of multiple different people, like people who actually study like neuroscience and whatnot, it's it's basically the same thing. Like it's not too far off from just being in a dreamlike state. The same
Right.
chemical processes that are that the brain undergoes in a situation like that, and that's why like that rush of endorphins happens when you have a near death experience, or like you're brought back to life. You're dead for a limited amount of time. It's a really interesting and deep field, like deep rabbit hole, especially to go down and study and look into. And I was really big into this when I was a lot younger and smoked a whole lot more weed.
Hmm.
um, and I've done psychedelics, I've done acid, I've done mushrooms and whatnot. I've yet to do DMT, but they're very, very profound experiences that really get you in touch with yourself and like your state of consciousness, and it's really existential as well. It's really, really interesting, and you can learn quite a lot about being and a lot about yourself, and you know the your life as is and like your experiences um, through these psychedelic trips and whatnot.
Right. Right. Right on, man. Well, we got you know, the Third Reich coming with
Oh
mass
yeah,
deportations. I think that'll be really when it sets in for people. But I keep
yeah.
telling myself that, and I don't know. I mean, the dehumanization seems to have worked really well, and
Unfortunately, yeah.
it seems like my understand. I mean, 47%, right? 47% of this
Mhm.
country is okay with internment camps being used to facilitate mass deportations. Internment camps,
They're
like the
coming.
ones we used on the Okinawans back in World War II.
Yeah, yeah.
FDR's greatest sin.
Yeah, it's just, the ironic thing about that is like the Republicans talk like because whenever lefties bring up how great of a president FDR he was one of the greatest presidents in American history. They always bring up that stain on his legacy. It's just like
Right.
yeah, he used the military to round up Japanese Americans. What the fuck is Trump like threatening to do right now when it comes to illegal immigrants?
Right. Same thing.
Yeah, it's like
Oh, the hypocrisy is
of course,
palpable with the
yeah,
conservatives. Yeah,
they're all
they don't know how
of course.
logic works. They don't know how values work.
Yeah,
They
like
don't understand
even
like how.
Yeah, even Rand Paul actually came out recently and said
Right.
that he like vehemently disagree with using the American military to go
Right.
like city to city and whatnot and round up immigrants. It's just a bad look. It's just like no shit.
Well,
It's like
Rand, it's gonna happen, my man.
do you need to use the military for that? Like what? Like it's it's disgusting. Honestly, like it's not the military's job to do that. For one, for two, it's like. Are the logistics in place like to actually carry that out, or are we
Oh
just
yeah.
like, or are we just going like willy nilly?
No, when the
Like I
federal
have
government
no
wants to do
confidence.
something, it's going to do it. When
No,
the federal government, it might not happen for like 6 months because they got to plan it or something,
yeah,
but they're going to go after, they'll probably go after the border states first, I would think. I don't know.
yeah. Who knows?
The thing
Like,
is, where do you take them? Do you just throw them back in Mexico? I mean, where do you take them?
yeah, it's
Do you fly them back to their home state or
you,
home, like home country?
you
What do you
just
do?
turn them indefinitely. I mean, that's kind of how it's sort of always been. You know, like there's the whole like border crisis, like whatever, in 2018, 2019,
Or
where
the caravan?
well
They called it the caravan. It was right around Kavanaugh's time, right? The
oh
midterms.
yeah but after that when a lot more reporting was coming out of the uh, detention centers along the southern border that had just had horrible conditions and whatnot. The reports said that like they're like the mistreatment of the migrants that were just being held indefinitely, basically, at the time. And it's just like how different would these new internment camps that are being built, like in South Texas, for example, how different would these centers be? You know, because you know the border bill that Kamala Harris was wanting to get passed and whatnot, the one that Trump shot down, it did have expansions of staff when it came to like judges and when it came to asylum process, like people basically processing immigrants and whatnot, and it would have definitely uh, sped up the process to figure out who these people are, where they come from, are they actually asylum seekers? Do they come here intending to work, or can we actually send them back somewhere? That's going to take a really really long time if a border bill like that actually does have like a legislative expansion of the system to oversee um, the whole process and whatnot. If none of that comes to fruition and like just everybody's just rounded up and sent to these internment camps and whatnot, they'll just be held there indefinitely. It's just like they're
Right.
going to get crowded really quick, and of course, the private prison indexes are going to keep going up, and they're
Right.
just going to keep on building more and more because like it works just like it does in the U.S. when you hold people in prison for the longest amount of time possible. That's how these prison contractors and this whole industry makes its money. It's how they profit.
The privatization of prisons. Good call.
Yeah, yeah.
Good call,
They're
Republicans. I think
all
the
over
Democrats
this.
were complicit in that, though, weren't they? Yeah, Democrats were complicit in that in the war
Yeah.
on drugs.
Yep.
They privatized prisons. Oh, the private sector can do it better than we can. Oh, yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure thing.
It's just like they can't be seen as being soft on crime or like pro drugs. Excuse me, or whatever the fuck, you know. So of course they're going to go along with Republican dogma on the whole issue. It was
So,
fine.
do you ever watch the PBD podcast, Patrick Bet David?
Uh, I've heard of them,
Today,
but I've never really watched them.
today is a beautiful day. Today is the day when I take you down to the cleaners and we solve the world's problems. No, he's ridiculous, dude. He has so many videos. Anyway, I was just thinking about Sam Cedar did an appearance with him that I thought was particularly enlightening.
Really?
Yeah, check it out. Yeah, let's do this. I think this is actually pretty insightful.
Hell yeah.
Stand by. Yeah, because Cedar is about as good of a debater and advocate for progressivism as there is. You know, we've talked
This
about
guy,
his old
okay.
friend. Yeah, this
I
guy.
know
Yeah.
this guy.
Mhm.
I've seen various clips
So
of
listen
this
to
guy.
how they argue by assumption. It's all just conclusions
Yeah.
that they've already drawn about things like the government can't do anything the private sector can, better.
Shocker.
So here we go.
Money was so freaking cheap for so long that we have to pay a price for it. And now you're looking at the economy. It looked like everything was good, but a big part of it was fake, Sam. We had a lot of fake success the last few years.
Well, I mean, look, I'm just measuring on, again, the way I view things is what's going to make things better for the most amount of people. And in terms of it being in favor of the capitalists, I would also change our tax policy. So, I mean, I would claw some of that back, quite a bit of it back.
What would you do?
I would return to the tax policy when we had the greatest, sort of the widest economic expansion shared by more people as a percentage of our population than any other time in this country, which was in the 50s and the 60s. And I would return to the tax rates more or less there. So your top tax rate at that time was 90%, top marginal rate, for every dollar over $470,000 you would earn. So that would be equivalent to around $3 million today.
Please.
I think we should return to that type of tax.
You want us to go as high as 90% at the top marginal tax?
At the top marginal tax rate. So understand, that only kicks in with every dollar above $3 million.
I hear you. And
yeah.
I mean, that's the famous Reagan situation where I think it was anything over $200,000 at that point. This might have been in the 40s. And he would only do 2 movies a year because you get paid $100,000 per movie, and then he wouldn't even do a third movie
Listen to this
because he would
example.
only get 10%.
Anecdotal.
The revenue, because
By the
he was
way,
like, fuck
here
it,
we
I'm
go.
not gonna
Here's
do it.
anecdotal versus data.
When Reagan started telling that story, you know who he was working for when he started telling that story, right? He was going around, I think it was for working for GE, trying to convince people not to get Medicare for all. I mean, if Reagan could have gotten 3 movies, 5 movies, he would have done it. He was working with chimps. He would have been happy to do that for his career. Believe me. So believe me.
What's the top marginal tax rate right now? 39%? What is
I
it
think
right
it's 37, 39%.
You're in
I
favor?
will say this, though, just to finish up that Reagan story. I will say this to you. I remember being in L.A., and taxes, top line had hit whatever the all.
I will say this to you, that today is a beautiful day. Today is the day when you come to see Patrick Bet-David and your career is accelerated. Because that's what this country is about. It's accelerating growth.
It was 57.5. I don't know what the number was. Around 57.5. You're in Brooklyn. So 57.5%. People are like, what the hell is going on here? There was this girl who was a top realtor in the San Fernando Valley area, one of the top realtors. Her picture
Another
was on all the
anecdote.
benches. Everywhere you would go,
You
would
don't
see
know
her.
the
And
data,
she was
so all
one of the
you got
realtors
are your
making very good money,
fucking
making $500,000
stories.
your income,
Yeah.
doing good for herself, whatever the number was, $400,000, $500,000. One day, I stopped seeing her pictures on the seats. And I'm at Wood Ranch with my wife, and I said, hey, you're the girl, right? She says, yeah, I am. She's with her husband and her 2 kids. I said, what happened? We haven't seen you lately. She said, it's so funny you ask. My husband and I made a decision that the moment taxes got so high, it was more important for me to be stay home. It wasn't worth me
San
working
Fernando
to
Valley,
pay
it's
this much in taxes.
California.
So there's a part of what he's saying. Yeah, whether he's going to do the movie
I think
for
that's
chimps and all
great. No,
that
I guess-
stuff.
I
But
guess-
there's a part of it that kind of
I guess my
incentive
point
needs
is
to be there.
America would not have suffered by the lack of Ronald Reagan movies. And I would
Okay, you're
also
trying to be
argue, I would
funny. I
also,
got you.
but I would also argue that, I guarantee you, there was no less houses that sold because that one particular broker stopped selling houses at a certain point.
So go to it. So right now,
I don't think that's a problem. I really don't. I mean, I think
to raise it to 90%.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think
Top line,
what
3
we're
million
talking
plus.
about is sort of the Laffer curve, actually, right?
Yeah.
You know,
You love the Laffer curve. You're a big fan of it, apparently.
I'll tell you what I love about the
Yeah.
Laffer curve is that we had a perfect example. We had almost like a perfect model of what happens with the Laffer curve, right? Like the Laffer curve argues that the higher the tax rate goes, the less inclined people are going to be to generate income, and then because they're generating less money, there's going to be less tax receipts collected by the government. Art Laffer was Sam Brownback's #1 advisor in Kansas. Do you remember this when Brownback became governor? He basically gave over his entire tax structure to Art Laffer. They had it destroyed the tax base in Kansas. It ended up destroying their entire education system. They had an amazing Kansas university. Brownback gets plucked out of Kansas and literally sent to be ambassador to Ether. You know what? They made him ambassador to faith because they didn't want this guy around at all. The Republican-controlled Kansas legislature raised taxes back up because it had destroyed their tax receipts. The theory may sound good, but it doesn't work in practice.
So are you on YouTube and Rumble or just YouTube?
I'm on YouTube. I think we put it on Rumble. I think we're also
cool.
on Twitch. And
All over the place. Okay, so let me ask you this question. If YouTube took their AdSense from 55 to 15, would you continue creating content?
Yeah.
You sure?
Sure.
You continue creating content?
I wasn't doing YouTube for a long time.
How do you make a living today?
I have membership. I have membership that people pay. I get ad revenue from different places.
Okay, so let's just say the membership that you get from Patreon or whoever it is, okay? What if their fees went from them keeping 5% to 60% to 90%? Would you continue creating
That's not
content?
the same fucking thing.
That's
being
God
privileged. You're
damn
getting
it,
paid.
dude.
You would get squeezed out of there because those are
Oh my God.
private entities operating within a competitive context.
Fees
That
are not
is
taxes.
Not the government. These are not taxes.
Yeah, it's
he's
like-
trying to use parallel. He's trying to use parallel example, and he looks like a fucking idiot to
Yeah, he's
anybody with an
stupid.
education.
He's stupid,
This
yeah,
is why
no.
education is so important, so that you can see through this bullshit. Logic classes, philosophy, logic classes need to be part of like senior year electives or something.
Yeah.
to,
AP
cut back
philosophy.
if there was that.
Exactly.
Well, but that's only because it's such a big change.
No, because that's the part about
on the-
incentives, Sam. So your audience gets
No,
to
no, no,
enjoy
no.
you.
I'm not saying we'll cut the revenue for these businesses. I'm saying that the amount of
You
money.
have no choice, though, because you're paying these guys. You
No,
need
no,
the
no, no,
revenue.
no, no, no. I'm not suggesting we cut revenue for businesses. What I'm suggesting is after that revenue comes in,
Right.
and
Yeah,
we
if everyone
divvy
gets
up and I have
paid.
my net profits, then my taxes would go up. But I will say this: like, if let's say the taxes went up on me personally, would I stop going on YouTube? No.
So would you be able to scale it at how many employees you got working for you right now?
I'm not talking about cutting revenue.
I get that. How many employees are you working for you right now?
We have payroll, I think, like 6 or 7.
Okay, you got
people.
that's a small business you got there, right?
Sure.
6 or 7 people. Okay. If all of a sudden AdSense went up, the fees for your Patreon, I don't want to offend you when I say Patreon. I don't know who you use. Whoever you use that's got your membership stuff that you got.
We use Fans FM.
Okay, there you go. That's a shout out to them. So Fans FM, Fans FM,
Fans.fm. It's actually a great
Fans.fm. Okay,
service.
fantastic. So if they raise
take
it,
less than Patreon.
if they take 50%, all of a sudden, and they say YouTube says AdSense goes to 15%, would you be able to employ those 6 people?
No, if my well, I don't know, but probably
Maybe that's because you're rich,
No,
because
no,
how-
probably not. But I'm not suggesting that we cut revenue for businesses. I'm suggesting that what is left over from revenue, if it's over $3 million and
Right.
it goes into the pocket of the
Income.
owner of this enterprise,
Yes.
that $300,000,001
Yeah.
gets taxed.
Let's
at
have fun
90
with it.
This guy thinks price hikes in services is the same thing as increases in taxes.
Yeah. Stupid.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
Like, yeah, it's like no wonder. Like,
and he talks about money all the time. This guy's supposed to know how money works.
yeah, like how the fuck do these people get to where they are? How does this guy even have how's he?
Because it makes sense to a lot of people, dude. People hear the stories and they're not really paying attention.
Yeah, people
and
love
they
stories.
think,
Like,
oh,
that's
they
all it
think this
takes.
guy.
Anecdotes.
Yeah, anecdotes,
God,
dude.
it's
They
so
think
stupid.
Dieter dichotomy number 9: anecdotes versus data, or stories versus statistics.
Yeah.
And Patrick Bet-David has all these stories, and then at some point, people just believe the bullshit that he says. They're not even really listening anymore.
No.
They're not thinking critically.
90
Let's have fun.
cents.
Let's have fun with it. So here's a question for you. And I kind of know what your answer is.
And I want to be
And this is another telltale sign of conservatives, is they keep coming up with questions to try to trap you. And instead of staying in the theory and concepts.
clear on something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. I subscribe to this not because I think that we need the money or
Yeah,
that this is
the
going
same
to
thing.
be
The
a
same thing
panacea.
happened with his talk with Tim Pool. Tim Pool does this all the time. Like he'll try to get you like to stay on a particular theory and explain like give all these anecdotes about like this and that and whatnot and like why.
Well, they
Sam's
think
position
that
is
by
bullshit.
poking holes, they think they can win the argument by poking holes in your argument. They think
Right.
that all they have to do is tear you down.
If they
and
have enough
then-
anecdotes.
If they have enough anecdotes that pokes holes in your argument, then it looks like Swiss cheese and they win.
Yeah.
But that's not actual argument.
It's
You
not
have
how
to-
it works. Yeah.
It's a 1-2 punch. It's you tear down your opponent's argument and then you build up your argument. It's like the double-sided coin of argument, but you don't see that anymore. All you do is see conservatism try to tear down proposals for change, because if there is no change, then they win.
Exactly.
in terms of like how we would spend this money.
Yeah.
But I see in this country a massive problem with wealth inequality and the commensurate
No, that's
political
not it,
inequality
Megan.
that comes
That's
with
not
it.
it.
We have wealth inequality in this country like we've never had
I
before.
don't disagree. So there's not a disagreement there, but the solution is where we're going to disagree. So let's kind of process that together. Okay.
What is
Maybe
the
whole
solution?
thing,
What's
like, I don't
okay?
know.
Okay, so there we go. So here we go. He just put a marker out there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pay attention, because I don't remember. I've only seen this once. I don't know if he offers an alternative to using taxes for wealth distribution. We'll see.
first got out of the military and I went into the financial industry. It's 1999. I know nothing.
Another
It's 2000.
story.
I know nothing about it. The speaker gets up. Well, have you been noticing that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poor? I'm like, okay, my dad's at a cashier at a 99-cent store 15 years. My parents got divorced twice.
I hope you said to that guy, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till 20
but
years
you're
from now.
right,
It's
though.
gonna be completely
but you're right, though. But why is the question? So here's the question for you. So you're saying about $3 million, that money that the owner's going to keep, we got to tax them 90%. Fine. Okay. So you believe the money, like when I was in the military, you would buy a product for the Humvees, and they would say, yeah, we paid $600 for this piece. We're like, dude, this piece is $40.
Right.
Why the hell are we paying $600 for? Well, the contracts. You know how they are, man. The government always pays a lot because they're dumb. They always pay more than it's usually worth.
Here we go.
A $40 piece for a Hummer, they're paying $600. I'm like, that's an awesome business for the other guy.
Yeah, we have horrible oversight in the military.
But this is the point, though. This is the point. And I want to actually sincerely get your thoughts on this, on how we address this. So,
Okay, there we go, too. Another example of horrible conservative cognition, where Sam goes into the specifics, whereas Patrick Bet-David is going to the specifics of his story, but it's only to service a general point. Always be on the lookout for specificity. The more specificity that people use in statistics, the more specificity that they use in their anecdotes that are relevant and part of a greater pattern, not just that one example, that's a good sign. Watch out for people with specifics in the way that they communicate, because that will demonstrate their command of the data. And that's one thing the left needs to get a lot better at, is commanding the data.
If it's specific in just to service an anecdote, then that's an issue. Obviously,
well, anecdotes can be useful if you demonstrate that they're part of a larger pattern.
Yeah.
They have to be one of many. The anecdotes have to be one of many. So if you told me a story about an immigrant killing someone, and then you showed me statistics showing that immigrants, like 80% of them, commit violent crime or something, then I'm listening. Then now you have my attention.
Like, okay, we have an issue. The issue is, if you actually look at the data, if you actually look at the statistics, it doesn't back it up. It's just fear mongering. Period.
Right.
End of story. There has been, like, you can list off all the anecdotes in the world, but if you don't have the data and statistics to actually back it up, then it's not worth addressing, because it's just a control mechanism. It's audience capture. You're like, you can list out like all the stories and all the anecdotes in the world till you're blue in the face, but if you actually get to the brass tacks of everything, like for example, more native-born Americans commit violent crime per capita than illegal immigrants.
Right.
Like, there's nothing to suggest that this isn't true. I mean, and you can make it. That could be the case for literally anything. It's like the classic white nationalist talking point about well, despite being 13% of the population, black people commit 52% of violent crime. It's like, for one, that's not what the FBI statistics actually say. What they say is that black people get arrested and charged more for a certain amount of crimes than the other demographics do. It doesn't mean that, like, just because they're black, they inherently commit more crime. It means that they've been charged for it. And not to mention, poor communities, primarily
poverty.
Black. Yes, it's poverty.
Yes,
it's poverty. Like what?
Yes.
Why else would you commit crimes?
But
like,
you're taking that second step of analysis. I call it the second step. Everybody can read numbers, but you have to read the story behind the numbers. And
of course,
you're doing that though.
Yeah,
you're not going in with this preconception that black people are more likely to commit crime.
Exactly.
So I'm going to look at these numbers the way I want to. I mean, this is intuitive cognition. It's just we took learning seriously, so we know how to kind of step past our own biases.
Yeah,
and by the way, everybody has them. It's just a matter of whether or not you're aware of them. Everybody's a little bit racist. Everybody's a little bit xenophobic. Everybody's a little bit sexist. It's true. Everybody has those. Whether or not you surrender to those biases, those prejudices, then that's up to you. But everybody has them.
Yeah, there's just a lot out there that can dismantle your preconceived notions about any given talking point out there. Like what I was just talking about. Like, consider the fact that, like, okay, these neighborhoods are a lot more impoverished, so like they're more akin to crime because they're desperate, like
Right.
they
Poverty
need to
breeds crime. Yes.
yes, poverty breeds crime, and so why like if there's a lot more crime in these areas in these neighborhoods and whatnot, they're going to be more heavily policed. So there's going to be more arrests. There's going to be it's like all you have to do is connect the dots, honestly, and not to mention when you factor in. Like what we were talking about earlier, private prisons profiting on keeping people in jail as long as possible. There you go. You just have it's the perfect storm. It explains so much. It explains why there's so many black people in jail because like their neighborhoods are more heavily policed because their neighborhoods are a lot more in desperate need of relief. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
they're impoverished.
Yeah, these are dysfunctional communities that we're talking about that have the most crime and they need
Yeah.
the most help.
It does
some-
lead back to racism. It's systemic. It really
It
is.
is.
It's just
Yeah.
like, well, if you neglect it for this long, and just don't give it the funding and uh, uh, foundation that a lot of these communities need, it's just a vicious cycle. It's like it's intergenerational at this point. It just keeps like
Yeah.
you
It's cultural
if you
and,
yeah, you breed poverty, it breeds crime, and it just goes over and over and over again. But
But
I guess
people
these kind of
don't wanna be
conversations are
right.
too
People
hard.
want-
These
Theater
conversations
dichotomy
too
number
hard to.
8, dude,
Yeah.
is like they don't want to be right. They want to feel right. They want to
Exactly.
and they make the easier cognitive choice, which is to just write those people off. It's easier. Think about
Yeah.
it. Your
No, yeah.
body, your mind is only so flexible and dynamic, right? You can't keep track of everything, so
Oh, yeah.
you categorize things, and it's like, oh, immigrants, they're a problem, so they're all a problem.
Right.
And then it's like you take a look around in your life, you start to pay attention how important immigrant labor is to this economy, and you realize that they're really essential.
Nothing
then
is
you
that
Step
simplistic.
back, and then you do something like you, where you look up the statistics, and then you're like, oh, wait a second, immigrants are actually just here, hardworking people sucking it
Yeah.
up, trying to make it work for their kids.
No, of
You know,
course.
But
Like,
nobody said that yet. Nobody said that about the immigrant mentality, how they're working for their kids.
Yeah.
I haven't come across that yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody will say it eventually, but I think people are reluctant to be presumptuous about the immigrant mentality. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of truth to it. Every immigrant I've ever been friends with talks about the tradition of sacrifice that
Right.
is consistent with the immigrant life. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Somebody
Yeah.
overpays for a product, that person's either got to be fired or they're an overspender or a terrible negotiator. But it's one of the three, right? Okay, so you feel money going to the government we do more good with, or money staying in the free market for people to produce more value? Where do you feel values
Arguing by assumption.
produce more?
Well, I'm not. I mean, I'm not sure I fully get what you're saying, but let me put it in this way.
It's a very simple
Okay,
question.
well,
I want it to be clear.
Let me
so-
make it a little bit more concrete.
Yeah.
So you guys know that the biggest part of the budget, more or less, is Social Security and Medicare, right?
And
I mean,
Medicaid, yeah.
and Medicaid.
Entitlement programs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can call them entitlement programs.
So there's two types of spending. I think it's called required spending and then non-required spending. And required spending is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those take up a majority of the budget. And then after that, the first item on discretionary spending is the military, which
Yeah.
goes up every freaking year, like to
Yep.
the tune of $50 to $100 billion, your
Yeah.
tax dollars.
Programs.
They are
I call them social insurance programs because
Tomato, tomato.
that's what they really are.
That's
I mean,
90% of the budget, I wanna say.
No, the military is about 850 billion. Social Security is like 1.7 trillion. I think Medicare is probably
Can you
close to
pull up
like
the chart?
700 billion.
about
And then there's
60%.
other. So, but
more.
It's a high number. It's a big number. You're right. It's a high number.
You'll find that I think our annual budget is somewhere around like 2.7 trillion, and the military is like 800 billion, 900 billion. You know that you can see anyways that they show us.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, Social Security, Medicare, the two biggest things that the government does are wildly popular. Medicare, you come from the insurance business, you probably know this. To administer health insurance, there's like 13, 15% cost in the administration of that health insurance. For Medicare, 3%. Far more efficient. Far more efficient. And copays are less. I mean, and the whatever you want to
Because there's no for-profit motive.
Yep.
call it, consumer satisfaction. I don't like to think of citizens.
The reason why it's 13 to 15% is because the company can make more money doing it that way.
Yeah.
Who do you think those administrative costs are going to? Come on.
As
Yeah.
consumers, but the satisfaction's huge through the roof, particularly when people use it. It's people appreciate it who don't use it. You know, if I got my parents and they're on Medicare, I'm pretty psyched about it because I don't have to take care of them. My mother's in a nursing home now. It's Medicaid that's doing that. I'm not responsible for that cost. Social Security through the roof. In fact, I think even a majority of Republicans want to expand.
But
Social
popular,
Security.
popular is not a way to qualify something. If I
No,
went
I
out
mean,
and
it's customer satisfaction.
if I went to high school and I said, guys, I'm giving dime bags to everybody weed, I'd be a very popular guy in high school. So
Well-
that is the wrong way to qualify it.
Well, you said efficiency.
Yeah.
Medicare, 3%
Right.
administrative costs versus 15%.
That's like the kid that's running for class president.
So he tried to do a little distraction tactic
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And Sam's not having it.
And
No.
it's like every Friday
Yeah.
we're throwing a pizza
Yeah.
party.
Well, if
He's
you
going to get
could-
everybody's vote.
if
But
you
who's
could provide-
paying for the pizza party? Sam?
Well, workers. In fact, I would argue that we should be actually removing the cap on Social Security taxes because right now,
This,
you know, it
this,
goes only up
this,
$160,000, right? There's a cap. Traditionally, Social Security has captured or touched 91% of the
Reagan
country's
did
income.
that.
You follow me? And now it's somewhere down in like the mid 80s because of wealth.
Yeah.
91% of the country's income. You follow me? And now it's somewhere down in like the mid 80s because of wealth.
Yeah, but your
inequality.
argument on the flip side of it, the argument can be as well to say, well, at the beginning when they came out with Social Security, there was only a few thousand people in America that was actually using it. It was not meant to be for as big of a behemoth
Are
of
you
what it is
kidding?
today.
No,
It
that's
kept
true.
2/3 of our
No.
elderly out of poverty. It keeps 2/3
Yeah.
of the elderly
No,
out of
low.
poverty.
The benefits of
That's not the
Social
argument.
Security.
though. That's not the argument. The argument is originally when it came out,
No,
it wasn't
see, it's
for-
not. Yeah,
Well,
see,
No,
no,
that-
to
like,
you,
holy
to you,
shit,
that's the
dude.
argument
Oh my
because
God.
that's what makes you feel right.
Yeah.
That's what you go original. You go to the original like argument because
Yeah.
that's what makes you feel right. You are literally
Yeah.
slashing
look
your
up,
way through the jungle the exact way. You know, when there's a clear path right to your right.
look up what FDR said about it. Like for crying out loud, and he didn't.
It
even
was
wanna
going to grow. It was
stop
always
there.
meant to grow.
Yes,
it was always
exactly.
meant to grow.
Like fucking FDR wanted to pass the second Bill of Rights and whatnot, and like it just didn't even get that far because he ended up not living that long, and then they actually had to fucking like FDR was so goddamn popular they introduced term limits. Like, give me a fucking break, dude. Like, if it wasn't to keep the elderly out of poverty, especially out after the fucking disaster of the Great Depression, then what the fuck else would it be used for? Like, why the fuck not? Like. What else would be looking out for like people once they retire and they can no longer hold down a job because like they're up there in age? What the hell else is there to keep them intact?
Right.
That's not the argument. Though. That's not the argument. The argument is originally when it came out, it wasn't for
Well,
the
they couldn't.
bigger percentage.
You had to wait. You had to wait
No,
until
no,
you build
no,
up the
no. You
fund.
didn't have to. You had to have capitalists work and overtax them to be able to fund it. That's what you have to do. But let me go back to
I
the
think what
question.
you are saying, just to validate your point, I think
Overtax
at that
them,
point,
dude.
this
Oh
is
my
FDR
God.
back in
Yeah,
the
we
day.
can pull up the data. That's
I think
not
there was
a-
40 workers for every retiree. I think now it's closer to like 3 workers.
Yeah, it's not
Yes,
sustainable.
but
Not even close.
No, it is sustainable.
You think it's
No,
sustainable.
I don't
not
think it's sustainable. I'm looking at the Social Security
the
Trust
letter,
Fund actuarial
with the
table.
letter when they sent you this, in the Social Security letter, they're telling you if we go this way, this is going to go bankrupt.
No,
in the
no,
letter.
no. You're
No.
misreading it. The trust
No.
fund is going to go bankrupt. In 1981, Greenspan and Reagan expanded the trust fund. We had a surge of baby boomers. There is a trust fund that exists that is essentially like a rainy day fund. That is going to be insolvent around 3033.
2033.
20
years. You are correct. I just had this conversation this past week.
However,
That's not a concern.
However,
That's not a concern.
however,
That's not a concern.
it is a concern. It will
Where
cause
did-
20% in cuts to our
Right,
benefits.
okay.
But that's it, period. Now, the way that we can get rid of that 20% in cuts in the Social Security Trust Fund is to do what I'm suggesting. Remove the cap so that every dollar you make, even above $160,000,
Yeah, but
is taxed by Social Security.
Sam-
And then your kids
Yeah.
will be long dead before that
Well,
trust fund is out.
hopefully, if I raise my kids right, my kids won't need to be
If
supported
they
by the
don't
government.
need to be,
Yeah.
if they don't
So-
need that social insurance,
yeah.
look, I mean, how can you, as an insurance guy, how can you not
There you
understand?
go.
No, I
don't sit around saying like, I hope that I don't need my
It's like,
fire
how do you
insurance.
not
I hope I
understand-
don't. If
yes,
your
like,
kids
hello.
don't need Social Security,
Yeah.
old age insurance,
But
then you know what?
but I
we
also,
will tax the money back.
I am better for
from-
society. I am better for society if I find ways to get people off of needing any of this stuff than to rely on it more and more and more. Because
Okay,
I'm
so what do you
hurting.
suggest? Okay, what do you suggest?
His
What do you
faith in
suggest?
capitalism.
Like,
It's
yeah.
his religion.
Yeah, it
Capitalism
really
is his
It
religion.
Yeah, if you can't, okay, so what do you suggest Social Security be replaced with? Like
He doesn't have any ideas. He doesn't want a government
Yeah.
program. He
Yeah.
thinks that capitalism can solve everything.
Yeah,
because
no,
it's a false messiah.
it's exactly
literally a
like-
violation of the first fucking commandment.
Yeah, it's exactly when Trump wanted to repeal Obamacare, which was saved by John McCain. When the Affordable Care Act wanted to be, when they were repealing it, they didn't have a replacement. And you ask them nowadays, like, what do you want to replace it with? I don't know. Oh,
Yeah, I have concepts of a plan.
Those who are
Yeah.
creating commerce. That's who I'm hurting. But let me go back to my
Hold on
question.
one second,
Wait a minute,
we
wait a
had an
minute, wait a
experiment
minute,
with
wait a
this. Hold on,
minute. Let me
finish
ask a
the
question
Social
for you. Let me ask a question. You still haven't answered my
401ks.
question for me. No, wait.
401ks is a private solution.
You still haven't answered my question. Let me go back to the question to you. So
Okay.
my question at the beginning, you have not yet answered. Okay. When you said, I would go back to the old tax system and I would take it to the 50s and 60s where we had a 90%. Okay. And I asked you a question. I said, who do you think produces more value? I gave the example of the Humvee, the pieces in the Army, how much we were paying, $600, but the piece was only $40. And the government tends to overspend because they're reckless spending. They're not really held
Going
accountable.
back to
Does
his
money
anecdote,
going in
show-
free market
shows
create
you how
more
weak he
value, or
is,
money
that he
going
has
to
to
the
go back
government
to
create more
this.
value for people?
Explain to me what you mean by value.
Okay, so value to me is, if I can give money to free market and lower taxes where they can go create more jobs, more opportunities, is that better for us long term, or is it better for us to raise taxes to take away incentives and give that money, tax money, goes to politicians to make decisions what to do with the money? Are politicians better at making decisions on what to do with our money, or are we?
I mean,
Absolutes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Absolutes.
Jesus Christ.
Are we
dude.
talking about the fire department, the police department, the post office,
This guy
the
probably
military? You want to privatize the fucking military? Like, I mean, come on, man. He just thinks it's a panacea. He thinks capitalism is a panacea.
I guess on
just doesn't
in
even
a broad
really
way, I
believe
would
in
say
taxes.
if we're going to look at the biggest chunk of money in the government to make this assessment, right? $1.7 trillion, Social Security. And we can compare it to the one sort of like comparable thing in the private sector, and that's a 401k. I would have to say, I mean, just based upon the way you set up this question, that obviously the government, because Social Security has been the single most effective program that we have in this country. It has kept 2/3 of our senior citizens out of poverty as a social insurance program. 401ks have been a disaster. They've been a disaster. Just Google right there in front of you the 401k experiment. People took the money out. I mean, and grant you, like, you can make an assessment that these individuals were stupid or immoral or whatever it is. I'm looking at the goal of keeping senior citizens out of poverty. The government has been able to do that far more effectively. 2/3 of our seniors are in nursing homes because the government is paying for it. You can look around at anything that doesn't involve a profit motive. Like, for instance, the post office. If we didn't have a government-run post office, do you think you could live in the most rural parts of the country and get postal service for 42 cents or 48 cents? You can send a letter? No way. What person looking to make a profit would do that? In fact, I've got a great example. This is, I was doing radio during Katrina, and there was a story that haunted me for years and years. When Bill Clinton, I'm not a huge fan of Bill Clinton's administration, frankly, but one of the things he did do well was to build up FEMA. I guess having come from Arkansas, he had a pretty good sense of what was important there. And Bush, when he came in, very early on, privatized a ton of it. There was a story, a very small story, in New Orleans. The buses that were supposed to come to New Orleans to evacuate people before Katrina hit, there was a whole ton of buses that went through 3 different contractors, right? There was like a general contractor and then a subcontractor, and another subcontractor was going to bring the buses. They were from like 3 or 4 hours away. And maybe it was 6 hours. I can't remember the exact details. They were going to send the buses, but the guy whose job it was, who owns the bus company, and then the contractor above that, they waited longer, because if you send the buses and they're not used, they're going to eat that cost, right? It's going to cut into their profits. They didn't send the buses. They didn't get there in time. People couldn't get evacuated. Would it have changed the trajectory of the thing? I doubt it, but it would have saved some people. And the point
like
is, that there are some
1,800
jobs
fucking people
that
died
the
in
government
Katrina.
does better, because the value there is not measured in terms of actual sheer dollars. It is measured in,
Saving the
essentially
lives.
how much immiseration are you inhibiting people from suffering. And so, yes, I agree that when it comes to
the
auditing
fucking-
the military, worst.
Yeah, the profit motive is like the great destroyer, like period. It's like your example when it came to 9/11, the fact that like airline security was private beforehand, and if it wasn't it like before it like became public security, the government provided security. Yeah, we haven't had 9/11 since. It's the profit motive. Like if they can't be bothered because they don't think they're going to turn a profit, or they think they're going to lose money, why go forward with it? Even though, like, the odds are you're going to save lives. It's disgusting.
The line in a capitalist society, I think we kind of have to accept that America is going to be a capitalist society for the foreseeable future.
Of course.
But the line that I think you could maybe get like Patrick Bet-David or someone who thinks they're smart and maybe has an open mind, I don't know, is stop thinking about these issues in terms of it's either the private sector or the government that solves the problem. Instead of that, think about what parts of our society should the government absolutely handle. And, after you get done with the fire department, police department, post office, military, as soon as you get done with all those obvious ones, I think energy facilities. I don't know why we need the for-profit motive for anything that's not like new energy. They're building offshore wind energy facilities in the United States now.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are going to be run by private companies. Not okay with that. I know a thing or two about offshore wind, and there's no reason to have a private company do anything other than install and maybe maintain the wind farms.
Yeah.
There's no reason to have the for-profit motive built into the rates that the people are paying.
Exactly.
The worst government agency we have, because it's very easy, very hard to sort of like scrutinize the military. People don't like that, and it's also a huge power base of a lot of money. They make a ton of money out of this. I agree with that.
Same with
But if you look at
insurance. Same with
Medicare,
insurance.
Social
Same
Security, well, listen, the numbers don't lie. 3% administrative costs for Medicare.
Can I just make? I appreciate some of the points you're making. I do think that you're kind of conflating a couple different things. I think to Pat's question, whether the government is better at spending your money or whether the private markets or private companies are better, it's not even close. If private
But what do
companies
you mean
ran
by
up,
spending
let me-
money, like to
let me finish.
buy like soda, or to actually like direct it in a way that keeps less people from
Okay,
suffering?
we have $31 trillion in debt right now. I think that's evidence enough, Sam, that we're not so good at spending
Oh my
money in
God!
America.
And
Listen,
again, they don't even understand debt either. It's like
I know.
we live in a debt-based economy. Just because like there's a bunch of like there's a bunch of debt doesn't mean that like the government is bad at
Well, what's
spending money and
responsible for
whatnot.
that debt too is Jimmy Carter had the national debt under $1 billion. I think it was like 300 million or something like that. And there's a lot of money back in the 70s. But
Yeah.
then Reagan came in, cut taxes, and spent more money on the military, and that progressed throughout the 80s into the 90s through Clinton with his neoliberalism. And even Obama and W obviously had tax cuts for the rich and corporations. And this idea of tax cuts being the vehicle for economic growth, we've just gotten addicted to it. And it's a
Yeah.
serious fucking problem because that's
Yeah.
not the way you grow an economy. That's not the way you
Right.
grow a society.
Yeah, of course, and not to
So it's the
mention-
it's the double-edged sword of the Republicans cutting taxes and increasing military spending.
Yeah.
Because they cut social service programs, but those things aren't even close to as expensive as military projects.
Yeah, I mean, look at the fucking Iraq War. Like, when all is said and done, we'll have spent $7 trillion on that. It's just like, hello.
Like, really good at
politicians
spending money.
Well, we're not good at
Management is a better word, yeah.
Okay, there's a difference between being frugal and being smart with your money and
Yeah.
just being wasteful. The government is clearly fucking wasteful. Where you are correct is that most retirees and most Americans do appreciate Social Security, do appreciate the entitlement programs that come with this country, whether it's Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, no doubt. But that doesn't mean the government is good at spending money. We're seeing that Social Security is about to go bankrupt.
No,
in
no,
next
the
10 years.
trust fund is
the
gonna be a
trust fund by
problem.
2023. And yes, I just had this conversation literally 2 days ago in D.C. where he kept using the word bankrupt. I said, what does that mean?
Who kept using that word?
This was
Which Republican used
It
that
wasn't
word?
even a Republican. He was sort of a Social Security financial advisor, expertise type of guy. But I said, what do you keep saying bankrupt? Is that meaning that retirees will not be receiving benefits? He goes, no, they'll probably be slashed by 25%. You use 20, so we can cut the baby in half here. But how familiar are you with the three-legged stool of retirement?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so it used to be you had three avenues to retire. You had pensions, which do they even exist anymore for
They
90% of
exist
people?
more as a defined contribution than defined
They're not very
benefit.
popular these days. I don't know how many people here have pensions. You have Social Security, which was never meant to be a retirement program. It was an insurance policy if you live too long, which basically Americans are now. Or you have your personal savings, which is the 401k. We can argue the merits of 401ks and Roth IRAs, what have you. But Social Security should not be keeping Americans afloat for 30 years of their life.
Well,
And
that's a failure of
problem.
the private industry, isn't it?
Why is it a failure of the private industry?
Well, I mean, Social Security is maintained. The idea that we're leaning on the government.
definitely better has come along.
That's a function
isn't
of
that
the private industry.
Isn't that a function of just the average person understanding how money works and saving money, investing and doing it properly,
I don't
versus
know.
the government or
Individual
institutions?
responsibility.
of the country
Oh,
lives
of
paycheck
course,
to paycheck.
of
How are they supposed to
course.
save this money?
Well, how are they spending their money? I guess is the biggest question. How many people have credit card debt? How many people? You just said when you took out a mortgage, you said, I'm an actor. What was the rate? You're like, I don't fucking even know. You should know.
Well, I was making so much money that
I don't give a shit how much money you
guy.
think, Sam. You should know what your mortgage rate is.
But I mean, I didn't remember what it was in 1998, but I mean, I know what it is now. But I mean, but I was making so much money, but I was making. I was in the top. I don't know if I was in the top 1% at that time, but probably pretty close.
So let me ask you a question.
And I was a single guy who had just gone from making $22,000 a year to all of a sudden making that.
How much were you
in less than
making
a week
at that point?
I mean, I was making a lot of
Now,
money.
how comfortable at that point would you have been paying 90% in taxes?
Sure.
So you actually want to pay 90% in taxes?
No. Let's
Why
be
would you
clear.
want that?
I think it should be 90%, over
After a cap.
for the every dollar you make over $3 million.
Yeah.
That would not have impacted me at that time.
So-
but I would have been happy to pay more taxes.
Yeah. If they
Why
actually,
would anyone?
what are they laughing at?
Each other.
You know why I'm laughing? Because it's always let's tax the people a little richer than me. It's always let's tax.
Well,
Swear to
the people.
God, this guy's
But-
so
but I'm
fucking
still-
stupid. Holy fucking shit. No, are they not fucking listening to what he's saying? Top marginal rate, meaning anything over $3 million is taxed at 90%. Fucking like below that, it could be as low as fucking 30%. They're not fucking listening to anything he's actually saying. They have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
They really don't.
Oh, but I'm just
If you're saying
I'm just going back
if you're
to
saying
what-
22
what-
a week, you're
I'm just
making
looking-
$1,098,000. That's a lot of money.
No,
to make a
well,
million.
it wasn't 20.
I
You said
would've
22 a
flipped
week.
the table.
That's $1 million a year.
No, that was the year before. I mean,
But you're making money. Let's just.
I was making a
yeah.
bunch of money.
So-
But
so-
I'm just going back to when we had the Great Compression, which was when we had the least wealth inequality in
Yeah.
this country. We had the GDP was consistent with where on our trajectory, but it was spread out. It wasn't like this. Essentially, it was more spread out. It's called the Great Compression, and I'm just using that figure. I mean, look, if it's going to be 85% over 3 million or 85% over 4 million, I'm just basing it on what was the most successful economic era of this country.
Why not do 90% over $250,000?
I mean, if the numbers bear it out, I'm agnostic as to that. Again, I'm just pegging it on when we had the most success in this country in terms of our economy.
Yes,
I appreciate you
bingo.
pointing out the success, but right now the top marginal tax rate federally is 37, 39. Okay, you do realize how shocking it is to say, all right, rather than go from 37 to 39, yeah, how about 40?
How many
about
people,
50?
How many
you
people,
want to go to 90?
How many people do you
90.
assume? How many people do you assume would be touched by that tax? Would be
Exactly.
Top
implicated?
1%. Look at this number right here.
Exactly.
Share of total income taxes paid.
Less.
The top 1% in this country
it's less.
pay 42.3%. The bottom 50% only pay 2.3%. So
That's
150
indicative
million
of the fucking wealth gap. That's because they
Yeah.
have no money.
Yes.
The
hello.
bottom 50% of this country has
idea.
no money. They're
Yeah.
all in debt. They're all in debt. Student loan debt, medical debt, most popularly, credit card debt.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yes.
They're not able to save anything.
No. Yeah.
people are paying nothing in taxes.
Right.
And you want to keep the 1% paying more and more.
I think it's actually even less than 1%, to be honest with you. I think we're talking about 0.05%.
Sure, but
Let's tax them even more.
Yes.
Oh, I specifically want to make it illegal to be almost as wealthy as you. Not quite, but a little bit more. Like, I want to make it not illegal. You're not going to go to jail.
So nobody can be no billionaires. No billionaires in America.
Absolutely.
Sam,
100%.
Why?
Yeah.
Don't you want America
I'll
to
give
be
you
known
an-
for greatness, for innovation, for capitalism? For all
It's
the
a
things that
fucking
we-
religion, dude. Oh my god.
It's their god.
Well,
Capitalism is their god.
Jesus Christ. It's like, wow, fucking I can't make any more than $999 million a year. Like like my greatness fucking neutered.
Well, that's
It's
also
like, holy shit.
there's also
dude.
like they're also not talking about income versus wealth inequality. So those are actually two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Wealth is capital gains, income inequality
Yeah.
is income. So that's how
Yeah.
much money you're making at your job. No one's getting paid $1 billion for a job. They might be getting paid in like ownership or something, like stock, as well as financial compensation, but no one's getting paid like, incomes over 3 million would affect a lot of people, a lot of 1%ers.
Mhm.
But if you were to say there's no, it would be hard. My point is, it would be hard to prevent billionaires from happening because you kind of do have a right to invest in whatever you want.
Yeah.
And if you start out with $1 million and invest really well, let's say 10 years, that thing's worth $1 billion. All those investments are worth $1 billion,
Mhm.
or maybe let's be 10 billion. Okay. Now, when does that get taxed? The money's got to move when it gets taxed. So when you if you cash out $1 billion from that 10 billion,
Mhm.
that's going to be a pretty big tax liability.
Yeah.
And that's where you can get creative about how to hedge that. You can give wealthy people
Yeah.
incentives to, help their neighbor out. But that's another episode. Once I get that episode done, we'll talk about that idea because I think it's a good one.
Don't this
My
And I got to get it on the internet so that people don't steal it.
definition of
You want to go
greatness,
to like Nordic socialism?
my definition of greatness is different from yours.
So if you like this,
Nordic socialism, dude, It's interesting you say that because Denmark is the happiest country in the
My
entire world.
definition of
You want to go
greatness,
to like Nordic socialism?
Norway.
my definition of greatness is different from yours.
So if you like this clip and you want to
God,
watch
dude. God, what? When did that clip come out? Does it say?
Yeah,
think
it's 1 year ago.
Yeah, I remember when he made an appearance on there, but I don't think I ever
Zelensky
got
made
around
an
to watching.
appearance on
He
there.
did. He did. I think I have to watch that too. Yeah, we should look up the tax brackets for 2025 and just take a look exactly what we're dealing with.
You want me to look that up right now?
Yeah, 2025 tax brackets. I think they were just
The top
Where was
marginal. You want to know what the top marginal rate is?
yeah. Is there like a
Yeah, there's a
graphic
chart
for it?
here.
Yeah.
Here, I'll
Yeah.
bring it up.
God, these fucking people, dude.
All right, so 37%
Yeah.
on 600 grand, more than 600 grand.
Single,
more.
yeah. So yeah, like I would be, well, I mean, because it's like it's so hilarious. I have no idea how this works. So it's like, okay, everything I make underneath $11,600, 10% tax. Everything I make under $47,150, 12% tax. Last year, before taxes, I believe I brought in like maybe like 53 grand. Fucking like anything over the 47,151 mark, that would be taxed at 22%.
24%,
That's
yeah.
Yeah, that's how it wait. That's how it works. It's like those top brackets, they can easily be more. It's like, are you really struggling? If I mean, hell, fucking add another tax bracket. Fucking, you got okay. Everything.
Yeah,
over,
I don't know why you just don't add another tax bracket and
yeah,
make it 45%.
Yeah, 45% over like a
Over
million.
over 3 or over 3 million. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to understand with the way is
far
there
with
like a
it.
wealth
Like-
gap chart because it looks like a parabola.
Yes. Yeah.
It
No,
looks
I know.
like-
I know what you mean. Yeah.
It looks like yeah, there we go. Here we go. Wealth inequality is growing. So this is it. Look at
Yeah.
that. Look at that.
Mhm. No, of course.
Okay, that's $10 to $400,000.
Hmm.
That was like not too long ago. That was 2016. So look at that. It goes down. You know, you're down to 90.
Hmm.
You're at like 12% of what you're at when you're in the top 1%. So
Yeah,
I
the
mean, it's just-
99th percentile, dude, is insane. The
It's
top
insane.
0.01%. It's like there's
Yeah.
no like, what the fuck are you doing with that kind of money? Like, what do you need it for?
They're setting up
it-
their grandkids. They're putting everybody through private school. They just at some point it's not even about how much you need or how much you want. It's a game, and that's the scorecard.
That's it. That's really all it fucking comes down to. It's like, oh, line go up, number go up, happy brain chemicals.
Right.
Fucking happy brain chemicals. You're just fucking, you're just stimming at that point.
Stemming.
Stimming, yeah. Disgusting system, dude.
All right, so we're at an hour and 20 now. Let's give this a chance. I want to see. This is the Pod Save America thing, and I want to hear. I don't want to listen to the whole thing, obviously, but let me see.
Complete expectations on Trump's side, but it really took us into the hours of polls closing for us to know for sure that things were not tightening. They were tight, but they weren't tightening in the direction we needed them to be.
And is that just because Trump's turnout was so high?
Well, honestly, I think it's a little bit mixed. I mean, we saw certainly Trump turnout high in early vote. We really believe that to be mode shifting.
I have listened to this whole thing, and I was keeping an ear out for 7 million fewer votes, and I didn't hear it. At no point does she say that Kamala got 7 million fewer votes than Biden did in 2020, a 9% drop.
And
Shocker.
It's actually 8.5%, but still, Jesus Christ.
that's what I think it was. I think we also saw turnout was as expected in rural areas. Like we didn't see anything that said, like maybe we saw in 16 or even in 20 that he had more turnout than we had anticipated. And our analytics really was quite close, much closer than it had been in 20 and in 16. But I do think we saw some lighter turnout in some of the areas we had hoped, but difference of a point here or there, which obviously in a close race makes a huge difference. And then I think we saw a little bit of a drop in support in a few areas for us. So that ultimately, I think, is why we weren't able to close the gap. It wasn't so much that what we were seeing in the battlegrounds was out of expectation or that he had some hidden.
Quentin, you were there when that switch happened. How were you able? There was a 1 month period between the debate and when the president actually dropped out. Obviously, it seemed like dropping out could be a possibility. Were you able to do any thinking or planning in that 1 month period about what a race with the vice president looked like, or did you have to sort of start cold on that first day, the moment you got the call or the statement went out?
I mean, we started cold. There was no planning involved in any other candidates. I mean, we were honestly in crisis management mode of keeping President Biden in the race.
He took his sweet time making that decision, and at no point did they think, hey, maybe we should put some notes together about how we're going to bring Kamala to the world, or maybe do an open convention. It shows you the level of dysfunction within the Democratic Party that this was how they handled this situation.
Yeah, and this was I remember this point I was going to bring up earlier. Like with Biden dropping out and Kamala Harris taking the reins, I'm almost certain that because she was getting all the campaign fundraising totals and all that, and everything basically transferred over to her, and her being the head of the ticket, I don't doubt in my mind whatsoever that they probably made her feel like they were in they probably made her feel like she was indebted to Biden for him handing over the reins to her, and basically like, okay, well, you have to do exactly what we say now. This is how it's going to go. Like, you want to be the head of the ticket? Biden gave you the endorsement. This is how it's going to be. Yeah.
Kamala was in way over her head.
Oh yeah.
With this shit, Kamala was not ready for prime time.
Convincing, Democratic allies that he could still do this. And one of the things was trying to keep the president out on the road as much. We were still doing everything we could from a campaign, and he made the decision that he did not want to continue on. And he pulled some of the senior leadership together and said that he was going to be with the vice president. It also wasn't anything that our team
and it took COVID to do it.
She's the nominee. We knew that there was still a situation where we had to shore up delegates, and that's where we started from. And then after that point, that is when we began to say, okay, how can we define her? Also, Trump's favorability numbers were creeping up, as Pluff said, and we had to do something about that as well. And so it was a lot of walking and chewing gum at the same time, but there really was no sort of contingency planning to turn the race over to her right after that debate or at any point until President Biden definitive.
In a very, very tough political environment, incumbent president, very low approval ratings, as Pluff mentioned, wrong track, right track, approval of the economy, all very challenging. Also, in at least the public polling, huge desire for change, right? Frustration with the status quo. Not just that's here in the United States, we've seen that across the world since COVID. Challenging place to be if you were the
Since
vice
COVID?
president to the
It's been a lot longer than
president.
that, bud.
Felt like much of the convention, as Stephanie mentioned, was trying to make her a change candidate, talk about turning the page. So can you talk a little about how you tried to do that and whether you think she could or should have done more to distance herself from President Biden? Something that I think, as evidenced by the answer on The View, she was at least personally uncomfortable with.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I think people, when they vote for president, want to vote about the future. And they saw in the vice president someone they didn't know a lot about a background. So, who she was, what she stood for, what she did as vice president. So in every step of what we were trying to do, we had to tell a pretty robust story in one ad or.
And here's the thing about progressive Democrats, because you clearly have no idea how your base thinks. We don't care what the leader looks like, sounds like, or acts like. We care what the ideas are. We care what the policy proposals are. What are the solutions? And then after that, we care about their ability to deliver. Now, that might have something to do with the relationship to the American public, but that is not the basis, or should not have been the basis, for Kamala's campaign. It should have been all ideas and all proposals. And they just kept making it about her goddamn personality.
Yeah.
One policy rollout or one event that you don't often have to do because of the time we were in. But I do think that we really focused from the get-go on how she was different than everyone else, different than Joe Biden, different than Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, the choice was her versus Donald Trump. And at the same time, she was very clear that she was a new generation of leadership, but it wasn't just like a statement. It was, here's what I need to focus on. her first policy announcements were economic, talking about housing, talking about lowering costs, understanding that people really didn't feel like things were progressing in the way that they wanted to, a la the right track, wrong track data, but how she brought her own point of view to thinking about housing, sandwich generation. That was probably her biggest applause line, one of the best testing things that we did. That wasn't a poll tested, let's work on this poll, this data to tell us this is the right issue we should go talk about. That was about her life and also understanding what people in the country were really needing. So I think that in a 107-day race, it is very difficult to do all the things you would normally do in a year and a half, 2 years. But I think wherever we had an opportunity, the vice president did put her own stamp on this and did it in a deeper way. Then I think probably we got the kind of full breadth of coverage on it. Of course, when you have an administration that a lot of progress has been made and you're part of that progress, it's complicated when you're asked questions in certain ways. But at the end of the day, I think she really, every time she turned, talked to a voter, every time she was.
She's obviously a numbers-driven person, and that's the case with a lot of political analysts. But if she knew the right track, wrong track numbers, why would it not be obvious to distance yourself from the incumbent?
Yeah.
Well, if a vast majority of the country thinks that the country's on the wrong track, then don't you want to make it known that you're going to be changing the direction at least a little bit?
Or at
And
least
she was on The View
acknowledge.
and didn't say that she'd change anything.
Yeah,
I mean, come
acknowledge
on,
the
it shows
fact
you how
that
thoughtless she is.
Joe Biden was deeply unpopular. Like his
Yeah.
approval rating was just falling off a cliff. Like
I
it
think
never
it was
recovered.
north of 50% once, if he was ever.
At
north
the
of
very beginning of
50%?
his
Yeah,
beginning
the
of his
checks.
term, yeah,
Yeah, with the checks that went out,
yeah,
out
and
on the
he
stump.
was
She
not
really leaned into
popular.
her own vision. But the headwinds were tough. I will also, though, add, of course, we lost. So I'm not here to say that that didn't happen. We would much rather not have that happen. But where she campaigned, we did way better than the rest of the country. And Donald Trump did worse, to the point that you were just talking about with Pluff. That idea that people have just a well-constructed, already baked-in idea about Trump and they don't need to learn anymore is just complete fallacy. I mean, his numbers are stronger today than they have ever been.
Yeah.
And that was critical for us. And we also believe this race was not just about Kamala Harris. It was Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. And we had to set that choice and that frame up. And I think that we were able to, anywhere we campaigned in all 7 of these states, where Donald Trump, by the way, campaigned too. He did worse and we did better. And we did make real progress against these national headwinds. If in every other state but the battlegrounds, there was a negative 8 point.
The incumbent killer.
Quentin, in the post-election analysis, there's been a ton of focus on the very ubiquitous trans ad that the Trump campaign spent tens of millions of dollars on. There have been sort of 2 strains of thought. This one, the sense that
I don't care about this.
her
do you?
position and the Democratic Party position on trans-related issues were
But went into it. But again, it wasn't something that we missed. It's just all of our testing told us that the approach that we were taking of her being more positive and talking about the economy and what she would do was a better tactic.
not to be
God, man,
Where are your instincts, man?
yeah.
Where are your... Oh, we tested it. We tested this and we tested that.
Didn't
So
amount
the
to shit.
tests must tell us what to do. We are slaves to the tests.
Right.
sort of overly nerdy about it, but that 7% is total money spent, not
God, just
number of ads run.
please,
Yeah,
like
yes.
one
So
of
it's
one
entirely
of
not
these.
ads run because it was candidate side ads, right?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me
But
get
I mean,
to
probably
another
like,
section.
Well, we did. I mean, I would just add, we did respond. What our testing showed, and look, there's no easy answers to this.
of course.
But we looked at this a lot, and we, and she never got directly asked about it, but was, obviously something we looked at in responding there. But we did respond for the people that were getting this on digital, and we did a ton more digital than the other side did. But we definitely threw out ads to make sure anyone that was.
Visit auraframes.com and get
A ton of money very quickly. You made huge investments in linear television. You made largest investment ever in digital. You did a huge field operation. In the post-election analysis, there has been, even from some folks, anonymously at least inside the campaign, some critique of some of the spending decisions around things like the set for Call Her Daddy, this, renting the Sphere, that sort of stuff. Can you talk a little bit? I'd love to hear you respond to those criticisms, and then maybe give, just want to get clarity on the point, is that do you think when you guys have done all the books, that whether the DNC will be in debt at the end of this race?
So, first of all, I think it was an extraordinary testament to the vice president to have the kind of grassroots support that she had, and built on the foundation of the list and the support that President Biden had and had built and we cultivated over years. We had some unique things that we had to do in this race.
Sort of identified who sort of the voters were who moved at the end. How do you feel about the utility of some of that earned media stuff?
Yeah.
Is it now feel a little bit like we're just sort of talking to our own people all the time?
Yeah. And not even in terms of who the targets were, the persuadable voters, which were largely young men, They're not watching the evening news. They're not watching cable. They definitely do not watch 60 Minutes.
Then why didn't she go on
so
Rogan?
older voters, maybe that's why Vice President did a little bit better.
She
with
talks
senior
about why
citizens.
they didn't go on Rogan. It was they give me some scheduling
look,
bullshit.
our background is
Yeah.
doing lots of earned media through the course of our careers. Does it help in where we stand now?
It's just
If you're a candidate with a limited amount of time to get your voice out there and define yourself,
I
you
would
kinda have
bet
to do everything.
anything.
But did it?
That- I would bet anything that she didn't go on Rogan because her team was like, "No, you're not cut for this. You're not built for that." They probably didn't explicitly say that. They probably just gave her some fucking runaround and just like, "Oh, like Joe Rogan, like independent media, like who actually cares and whatnot." It's just like,
lowbrow or whatever. But
Yeah,
they also weren't playing to that demographic. They lost young men because they didn't play to them. They didn't
Yeah.
meet them where they were, so to speak. Everyone just keeps saying that.
turns
Screw
out
their
that would have made
narrative,
a
not just-
gigantic difference if they actually did, like, or at least tried.
in getting shit for not doing enough earned media, but getting questions that we knew voters weren't going to care about. And their myopic mindset on certain issues was not what the race was going to be about. So at a certain point, we had to decide: is this helping us or hurting us? And
What did you decide? You
Well,
can say it.
I would say, I mean, look, I am not media hater by any measure, and I think that, we women don't get far in life talking about double standards, so that's not the point. But I do think a narrative, 107 days, 2 weeks fucked up because of a hurricane, 2 weeks talking about how she didn't do interviews, which, she was doing plenty, but we were doing in our own way. We had to, be the nominee, had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in. But real people heard in some way that we were not going to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump that I think that was a problem. And then on top of that, we would do an interview, and to Stephanie's point, the questions were small and processy and about
dumb.
They
Just
were
dumb.
they were
Like,
not
the least
informing
you
a
could do.
voter who
Okay,
was trying to listen.
you say you're not like a media hater. Why? Why not? They were like they were harping away at Kamala Harris not doing interviews and whatnot, and not enough on Trump, who is basically in the exact same position, refusing to do fucking interviews or appearances, didn't go on 60 Minutes or whatever the fuck.
Well, you have to
Like,
remember
for-
too that when you say
They care
media,
more-
it's a
they-
problematic term. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of media, and when she says she's not a media hater, I can't help but think she's talking about MSDNC.
No, yeah,
she's talking about Morning Joe
That's
giving
exactly
them
what I'm
props
saying.
for such a job well done.
yeah. It's like those are like the biggest apparatuses, and so it's like, of course they're going to try to fucking cater to them and play them up and whatnot, and not drag them for, like, even if their coverage of the Harris campaign is less than adequate, is even like remotely hostile and whatnot, because they value their exposure on those networks more than they do their integrity.
All right, let's go to another thing.
The core of our campaign was an economic contrast in these battleground states, but it was an important element of it.
Quinn, can you talk a little bit about, at the end, there was I'd be curious in your data, what percent of people in the last week were undecided or movable, and sort of who those voters were. And I know that a lot of folks in the campaign said that, in that last week where it seemed like the vice president, was clearly closing very strongly, and Trump seemed to be imploding everywhere. Just were the last voters moving in your direction? There just wasn't enough time, or did Trump, win those late deciders?
I mean, it's hard. Look, he won the election, so it's hard to say that they broke our way. But look, we saw a shrinking pool of undecided voters all the way until the end. And as Jim mentioned, Republicans were turning out early to vote. We were looking at it to see if it was mode shifting, meaning were these people who would normally vote on election day as Republicans just voting early, and that was the case. And then so we sort of knew this wasn't some surge, of Republican voters turning out. And ultimately, not enough of them broke our way. These are those voters that were in that margin that we were counting on to get us over that hump. To your previous question that you just asked and that Fluff answered, I think that there's a lot of things to learn in this election, but I think overlearning some of them is a danger as well. There's a number of states that will be on the board, including in 26 that are Senate races, that will be very hard to win without getting some of those voters that we were talking to. And I think
Those
that
Republican-leaning
those
votes.
Republican-leaning voters. I mean, and if you look at it,
No,
and again,
no, for fuck's sake, no. God damn! Wow.
It's almost like they don't know that everybody's 4 years older now, dude. Millennials are so much
Jesus
more likely
Christ.
to vote than they ever have been. Gen Z has been politically activated by Trump, and I'm so worried about those guys and girls and like everybody in that 18 to 29 demographic.
Yeah.
It's disconcerting.
And this probably
It's
sounds, I
like,
hope it doesn't
those
offend the
aren't,
people listening, because it's really not. But
those aren't Republicans. They're new voters. Like, you have no
Right.
idea whether or not
The
they're going to
participation.
go.
Yeah, it's all about
Yeah,
turnout.
yeah.
No, they overthought
Exactly.
it. They overthought it. They thought they needed to go the more circuitous route, and they
Yeah.
fucked up. Now, he just said this doesn't sound defensive, so here we go. Let's see what he has to say.
if you look at 22 and you look at 20, that's how Democrats won these races. And I mean, 9% of Republican voters voted for Raphael Warnock in Georgia in 2022.
And you managed this race.
Yeah, and there is no Democratic majority without the state of Georgia. And so when you're looking at some of these states,
What about new
North Carolina,
voters?
Gary Beasley almost got
What
there.
about young
She did, of course.
voters? For crying
We've
out
got liberal
loud.
voters, Republican voters, and of course, look, if you can turn out more of your base voters, that is good. But especially as we head into a midterm, and we also saw these voters beginning that trend of coming through Democrats in 2020 from the Biden race was the first time they did it. In 2022, we said, can we hold these voters? We ran strategies to try to do that. We were successful at doing it. So these voters had given us indications that they were, willing to be open to Democrats. And we spoke to them, and we kept trying to speak to them. Now we saw some of them going back in Trump's favorability to that piece. And so a lot of this was getting that down. And you could either
She
Was
didn't
that really
do
true?
as well with Kamala didn't do as well with Republicans as Biden in 2020
Bingo.
or Hillary in 2016. This
Yeah.
is obviously a failed strategy, man.
They think.
You think? I mean, sorry, not to be racist or sexist, but conservatives are more likely to be racist and more likely to be sexist.
Yeah.
So you don't think that
he thinks?
you think it's funny because he thinks that only the Democratic Party moniker matters. He's
Yeah.
like, oh well, they were willing to vote for Biden and they were willing to vote for Hillary and they were willing to vote for, but Kamala, dude, are they willing to vote for Kamala? They talk in the first part of this all about building up her image and her brand or whatever, introducing her to the country. But now they're talking all about the data and testing and trying to please people. It's a contradiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a contradiction. Are you presenting something or are you responding to something? It can be both, but it has to be back and forth. It can't be both in the same moment.
No kidding. Like, you can't be like responding to the advent of Trump while also that can't be like your primary focus. You do have to be presenting something. You have to be offering something. You can't just be a counterparty. Like that's not how any of this fucking works anymore. And it says a lot that these fucking strategists are like, oh well, I mean, if we thought like all these voters in the midterms,
Yeah,
would be
according to our testing.
securely Democrat and whatnot. I guess like instead they just went to Republican. No, that is completely fucking the wrong framing, the wrong thinking about this. It's not that the Democrats are just like not going to go for you and just go for the Republicans. They're going to stay home. They're not. They're just not going to vote for either party because you're not offering them anything because you're not speaking to them. So what's the fucking point?
either have a Democrat trying to give that message, or you can have generals and people who worked for Trump
And,
delivering
and
the
your
message.
net data said this probably had more credibility to do that than a Democrat.
100%. And so I just think that, at the end of the day, there's obviously work that needs to be done on both sides, but I would caution just trying to say that you should just throw that to the wind, especially, and maybe it does end with Trump. But, to the point of how we got here and the voters that allowed us to get to this point, I think a lot of those voters, and I think that was a big part of it. And I think it's a false choice to say it has to be one or the other. I think that is a mistake. I think we just have to do everything and we have to do it better. But I don't think that this is saying that by trying to win those voters who have shown you in the past 2 cycles that they are open to Democrats, you are abandoning the base.
Well, and I would
When progressive Democrats see their presidential candidate buddying up with Liz Cheney, trust me, bro, they're pissed.
Yeah.
And they're a lot less likely to vote for you.
Yeah.
A lot of them, I bet a lot of like politically savvy people like in California or whatever just didn't vote for Kamala because of that, and then they filled out the rest of their ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Happened.
just add, I agree with this so much, and I think to win, you need to have moderate Republicans and progressives of all ages. Like we cannot
Yes.
win without these core elements. We don't have the luxury of choosing one group of vote or another. But in the battleground states, we were.
That's a crock of shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crock of shit. So talk to me about those 7 million votes then.
Mm-hmm.
What makes up those missing 7 million votes? Okay, you want to say 2.5 went to Trump. That leaves 3.5 left. So
Yeah.
who are those 3.5 million votes left? Progressive Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
We're heavily focused on suburbs. We knew they were very important in 22. Obviously, we're very, very focused on
You
women in
didn't
particular,
focus
but
heavy enough
moderates,
in the rural
independents,
areas.
And the vice president actually did better in the WOW counties in Wisconsin than Joe Biden did. And while the rest of the country moved 5 points to the right in the suburbs, we moved a point to the right. So that isn't enough to win. But just a reminder that like we understood the work we had to do. And when your opponent is trying to make you more extreme and to make you dangerously liberal, the ways you can push back on that, you know, we talked about the trans ad earlier, is by having people stand with you that don't agree with you on everything, but do see in you. It wasn't just that the Republicans that stood with us were saying they were against Trump. They were also saying they were for the vice
Stop
president and why. And I think
responding
that
to them. Like they okay, fucking. That's not how you do it. It's just you're fucking. This is like I'm. It's like I'm okay with Republicans. I got a Republican friend here. I'm not anti-Republican. Like that's not how you respond to it. You call it out for the dishonesty.
Trash.
You stand firm on your beliefs. You stand up for the policies that you believe in. You stand up for the policies that you know people are going to like, that people are going to hold you in high regard for. Like, actually stand up for yourself. Don't be like, oh yeah, no, I'm just like you guys. I'm chill with you guys. You don't have to call me extreme. You fucking weak. God damn it, dude.
It also stems from the culture of the DNC elite where they think they know better than their constituents. And this woman right here thinks she knows better how to present the ethos of leadership in a public context.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but you can do all the tests you want. They don't use data in scouting talent in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Okay? When you see someone, you should be able to tell whether or not they're charismatic. You should be able to tell what they need to work on if they're an incomplete candidate. Obviously, Kamala's big miss, not knowing the data, not knowing the facts, not knowing, having like a laundry list of ideas. Okay, fine. You're going to have all these policy proposals. Like, let's hear them in a bite-sized way. She never did that. They act like we were talking about policies. Like, well, not early enough, because that's what progressive Democrats come out for. Do you know your base? And the answer is no, dude. That's why we like on this show we can get trapped into like trying to over-intellectualize these things. But at the end of the day, just when in doubt, don't give your intellectual opposition that much credit. Unless you know them really well, judge it based on their actions and assume they have organizational dysfunction.
Yeah, not to mention these strategists, they're never going to make an appearance on a platform, on a show, on a podcast that's going to be confrontational with them. Right. Like even remotely is not going to be as like pressing on them about.
This is Obama guy. This guy is an Obama guy.
Yeah, it's like they're going to be like they're just going to run down like everything that they did as a campaign, like which ultimately amounts to we tried our best and like we just didn't. It's like they're not going to be pressed on like difficult enough questions and whatnot, and just like their strategies themselves are not going to be criticized or scrutinized or looked under a microscope. It's so frustrating.
Had real impact. Not enough, but it definitely was an important calculus to the broader framing that Trump was trying to drive people to us, and to also just by having these folks stand with us at the volume that they were standing for any reason they were with us. It wasn't just about democracy. It wasn't just about January 6th. That really showed to people who didn't know her that well that if those Republicans would stand with her, well, she couldn't be so extreme and dangerously liberal as Trump was trying to frame, because these folks wouldn't be with her, as a baseline.
It's always worth reminding people.
She was not ever really labeled as dangerously liberal, and it's like they're afraid.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, she might come across as too woke. I mean, they're cowards.
They're gigantic cowards. They're gigantic
They're cowards. It takes so much more toughness to say you fucked up.
Yeah.
Take the loss like a fucking grown woman.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, it's not sexist to say that because you're acting like a fucking child right now.
Yeah.
Excuses are like assholes, man.
I think was complicated.
Yeah.
Stephanie, it felt like one of the driving forces of this campaign was that there was a segment of voters, primarily young men, who were simply and seemed almost impossible to reach with the traditional tools that Democrats have. Linear TV to some extent, certainly earned media, as you mentioned. It appears that Trump had some ability to reach them. And, there is an argument I very much buy, which is the difference between the national and the battleground states was because you guys were in the battleground states campaigning. But there's also an alarming version of that, which is where we are not spending $1 billion in field and TV, the country is moving farther to the right because organically some groups of voters are getting right-leaning messaging or anti-democratic messaging. What did you guys sort of see about that group of voters that are hard to reach? And any thoughts you have yet, and I would not blame you for not having them yet, about how we can reach those folks going forward?
Well, I would say a couple of things. Like you said, this race was, a little different than most anything else. Trump is a different kind of candidate. We had a Democratic candidate get in 107 days out, part of an administration
Just answer the
coming out of
fucking
COVID,
question.
inflation, et cetera. Trump never stopped. Trump, obviously it's important to him that he portray this very masculine, strong figure. And so how does that show up for people? It shows up at UFC fights. It shows up with Dana White speaking at the convention. It shows up with the kind of podcast that he's doing. It shows up in his rhetoric. And he's constantly picking a fight and showing that he's going to take something on. I'm not saying we mimic that. We don't want to mimic that. But we have to pay attention to why people find that appealing. And his use of TikTok and specifically reaching those younger men. I can't tell you how many friends of mine or nieces and nephews would say to me, I'm getting these things from Trump all the time on TikTok. And they're not political people. They weren't signing up for that
what'd
stuff.
you do
But
about
Trump was
that?
reaching them.
Yeah, what'd
So
you do
there
about
is
that? Did you get on TikTok? I mean, one of these things that about like her not doing interviews, if she had filled the void early on in the campaign with like a daily video on an issue, like, hey, let's talk about
Directly talking
urban,
to voters.
Here are my thoughts on urban poverty. Here are my thoughts on immigration. Here's what I really want to do with immigration, because we all know that was a political ploy to outsmart, Mike Johnson. But
it would have made a world of difference if they actually got on every platform they can.
Creative communication, man.
Yes.
Creative
Yes.
communication. That's what we got. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
A lot for us to learn.
And bringing in some fucking competitors, both as candidates and as consultants. Give me competitors.
That.
Yes.
But I will also say a lot of that was very specific to that candidate, in his messaging and why that was.
I can't listen to this bitch.
Why
Hold
people were
on.
open to that
There's one more
messaging.
section, I think.
We can go really deep into why, and we can go into a conversation on people
you're
thinking
not
that
gonna,
Democrats
huh?
are squishy.
Yet still gotten incredibly high turnout. You guys invested a ton of a traditional field organization, and yet still gotten incredibly high turnout. You guys invested a ton of money and time in the field, particularly in this election. Is there, and that obviously bore fruit, so I'm not suggesting it didn't, but is there anything you take from this that makes you question how we have traditionally done field in the Democratic Party in terms of efficiency or efficacy?
Well,
I know this is a loaded question for you.
yeah. So first of all, I think against national headwinds, we would not have come as close
And
as we did
I stipulate that.
without organizing. And I think that part of what we have to do as Democrats and on our side is, do the work of having the conversations and reaching people. I just think that is a part of our party and a part of the people lower propensity that we are trying to reach, that we can reach effectively through programs. At the same time, I think that, and I think Republicans generally have not had that same challenge because for the most part, their folks have kind of turned out pretty consistently. I think Trump, again, is an anomaly. So I would be careful to put tactics to him that could work for someone else, because I'm not sure on his side that that's possible. But what is true, and what I do think we need the answer to, is how do we reach people in ways that isn't just about traditional field? And we worked very hard at this, but I'm not sure we sort of solved all of it. There's the door knocking, there's the phone calls, there's the texting, there's the ways to reach people. We do that effectively. We know how to do it. We have volunteers. Like, we had extraordinary people that came from all over that were part of the battleground states that did the work, did the trainings. We did contrast at the doors and on the calls. You don't typically do that. Our folks were able to handle all of that, and it was a testament to the overall organization, and the organization could scale as we had just growing
See,
support.
the problem that I have with their post-election analysis, well, there are many problems, but in general, they're getting caught in the micro. They're getting caught in the tactics, whereas they made bad strategic decisions. The overarching strategy was flawed.
Yeah.
Exactly what you want to see. We spent a lot of time.
You know what really happened, dude, is Biden took his sweet time making the decision. They weren't really sure what he was going to do. And instead of making use of that time preparing Kamala or whatever, they got blindsided. And then they were constantly playing catch up so creatively in terms of messaging. They just ran Biden's campaign. They just continued with the themes of Biden's campaign and put a different face on it. And that wasn't good enough for American voters. Now, that makes the loss that much more Kamala's fault.
Yeah.
Because if she had stepped up and say, wait a second, this is my name, this is my reputation. I know you guys love Joe, but we got to learn from our lessons of the past here and get some big ideas into the media sphere, because that's, we had policy ideas, and I'm not saying that she didn't. It's just none of them were head turning.
They're all
like
just cowards.
That's the political marketing.
Yeah.
That's the salesmanship, is like, you got to turn heads. If no one's
Yes.
paying attention to you, then you can't influence them.
Yes, that's spot on. Just nailed it.
Even
honestly.
earlier in the year when President Biden was at the top of the ticket, working on, and I hate fucking terms for field, so I like relational.
You
organizing.
invented most of them.
It's like all organizing or field.
I don't
still
know
say
how much
field, but
more I
anyway,
wanna
whatever.
do this.
Relational. The bottom line is, we know, especially in this environment that we're talking about, where people are tuned out to politics, they want to stay away from the chaos of Trump. They don't trust institutions. They don't trust parties. How do you reach them? You reach them by people they trust in their own lives. So much of what we were trying to do was to get to the young people, not just to talk to them, but to give them the tools.
So
and
they leaned really hard on endorsements and surrogates and like ground campaigning. It shows you they got caught up in the phase that they were out. They didn't take a day. They should have taken a day or two or a whole fucking weekend after Biden announced and be like, wait a second. This is crazy. We need to give the American public, look at the popularity numbers, right track, wrong track, approval ratings. We need to give the American public something different.
Yeah.
Something different. And they had something different with Kamala. That's why they could have won.
Yep.
I have no doubt that they could have won.
Of
They
course.
could have won. They
Yeah.
could have won with a better strategy, with a bolder strategy. They could have won this election.
Yeah.
empower them to speak to other people in their lives. And I think that we made some progress here. I think, there's lots of technical things that help us do that. But at the end of the day, there is no doubt that Donald Trump figured out how to do that and did that to young people, young men, in a way that he, created some of this coolness to folks. And most of the people that wouldn't be harmed, are the ones that felt like that he was cool and they would respond in the podcast and so on. Young men in particular, young white men in particular too. But this isn't to say this is all just about young white men. From how you reach people, I actually think, we worked a lot on sharing content. We worked on trying to talk not just to our own people, right, which is one of the problems and the limitations of platforms, that you're just speaking to the chorus. It's part of the challenge. How do we try to get people to then be inspired to speak to people in their own lives and to do it in a way that is not political and not partisan? And I think we had some hits and misses, but we've got to solve this, because you cannot put enough money into social media and digital advertising and paid programming to have the impact that organic reach has when people are empowered to speak in their own lives and are willing to take that on. And we saw that, and we saw our people do it. It just wasn't getting far enough, and it wasn't actually infiltrating at the level that we've been talking about. So there are systemic issues here. There is also just elements that, we just got to figure out from a campaign standpoint. Like,
The
it's easy
trick
to
is
do or
like,
not,
okay,
it's
so
not
like
hard, but when you
ultimately you're just afraid of being political about things without realizing that pretty much everything is political. It's like it's just cowardice. Like everything's just centered around cowardice. It's not being bold enough when it comes to any of your tactics. It's like you want to make a splash. That is the fucking point. You want to differentiate yourself. That is the point. Not fucking coddling up and just like being buddy with Republicans and trying to make it in an effort to like not seem as extreme. Like if you wanted to actually turn heads and get attention and whatnot, and actually reach out to young voters, especially young white voters, you need to be like really freaking bold when it comes to it, and like it's just a failure. It's just cowardice.
How to track it, and how to be accountable to it. Like, there are structural challenges that we have to work on for sharing content that has as much power as it does doing a door knock. And so there's things that we really tried to implement this time, but I think we still have work to do to understand. And there are groups that do this well. You do not have to just be part of the political campaign environment. We have to pull ideas from everywhere, because at its essence, it is figuring out how you reach someone that doesn't really want to be reached about topics maybe that they don't know that they really want to engage on, and that they retain it and carry it forward to then be willing to take an action. And that really is going to require more community, more inputs from different parts of your life.
It's also going to require like actual issues, like what, like what exactly were they championed that they think that they can reach like just completely unengaged people on? It's just like I really like to know what they were toying with, what they were looking into as a means of reaching the people that she's talking about.
So that entire interview, I encourage people to go listen to it, Pod Save America, because
I can't believe
it's a really great window into the culture of the DNC.
Yep.
And in case you didn't just notice, the culture of the DNC is corporate.
Yeah.
It is very theoretical. Instincts are not celebrated.
Yep.
It is data-driven to a fault.
Big time.
There is an absence of creativity. Some might say artistry.
Yep.
But if I were in that interview, and asking that woman a question, I would say, I know you don't have balls, but where were your balls on this campaign?
Right.
And if
No,
and
no
if you don't
kidding.
like and if you don't like the way I'm talking to you, if you don't like the way I phrase that question, then you don't know dick about communicating with younger men.
Oh yeah.
Or even millennial or Gen Z women. Like they think
God.
that shit's funny. Like I've heard peers of mine that are women say like, where your balls or something like that to another woman. Like it's funny.
Right. I
So
mean, at the very least, just like
where your guts, you can use whatever word you want, but the point is that there was no bold, decisive policy proposals. There was nothing to hang her hat on other
yeah,
than I'm not Trump.
the point is, it's like fucking like everything surrounding Trump is just crudeness, and that is appealing. I mean,
Well, she could have gone the
there's no
opposite
length.
direction, though.
Yeah.
Imagine if they did walk and talk interviews with her every weekday. A new video came out, or every other day a video came out, and it was just about policy. It was
Yeah.
just policies. Like you want the joy or whatever, you can get that on mainstream media. And when I go to interviews, right now it's you and it's me and some policy. Let's
Yeah.
talk. But
Yeah.
they're not conditioned. They're not taught to think like that.
Yeah.
And that's why we need more creative people. We need more competitive people. And that means getting rid of the baby boomers because they are intellectual dinosaurs. And those people are Gen Xers, by the way. Those staffers were
Yes.
Gen Xers. And they probably, have Clinton, Biden, obviously have Biden experience, but, Obama experience too. And everyone's in there just believing their own bullshit and acting as if it's real constructive criticism working on getting better. And when you see the 7 million vote chasm, okay, when you see the 8.5% drop in turnout, that is a strategic failure. You failed on a big level, not a small level.
Yeah.
You missed a paradigm in the beginning when you were doing the arithmetic on what your strategy should be. You're like, wait a second, is door knocking more important than having a ubiquitous presence on TikTok? Hindsight's
Right.
2020.
Yep.
Because now young kids think it's cool to vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now
there's-
that means we're gonna have to fight them.
Yeah.
That's gonna
there's
be fun.
so much ground to make up, honestly. Yeah. Beyond frustrating.
All right, man, we're coming up on 2 hours. Do you have anything else you want to say to the people before we say goodbye?
Have a great Thanksgiving, and good luck with those problematic family members.
Yeah, just don't let them ruin your Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I wouldn't spend it with them if you have an option. Don't
Yeah.
spend it with Trump trash. Get stoned and enjoy some football with your fellow lefties. And if they're liberal, tell them to grab their balls and listen to the progressives. Because we know better how to win, which is obvious. That is the big lesson. Not only are progressives more interested in structural change than are liberals, but we are also more interested in bigger campaign strategy, in winning campaign strategy. Our campaign strategies are more competitive.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Megan says, love the idea of a daily policy specific walk and talk. Yeah, like I like when Trump won and he was putting out all those videos like one after another. This is what I'm gonna do about this policy issue, this blah blah blah, and this and that, like one after another. It's just like, wow, if the Harris campaign did that, just like use social media, just have a direct relay to her voting base or just like the American public in general, what a gigantic difference that would have made. But like just too scared, just didn't want to scare away the people that they were trying to court. Let's
get Liz Cheney, who voted with Trump 90% of the time. Good idea. Good idea.
Yeah.
All right, Stat Pat. Thanks for your being there tonight. And
of course.
we are both reminding you all to have a great Thanksgiving And you don't get change in America by asking nicely.
Have a good one, y'all.